Conducting tonight's meeting in person here at City Hall Council Chambers, as well as virtually using Zoom. Members of the public may view and listen to the meeting tonight on Wave Channel 18 and online through the city's YouTube channel. If you would like to participate in live public comment via Zoom, please refer to the agenda for instructions. David Loya from the Gathering Inn will be giving the invocation this evening, and Mayor Andriotta will begin the meeting immediately after the invocation. So David, if you'd like to come up to the podium, thank you.
Now we're on. Very good. If you'd please join me in prayer. Lord, we invite your Holy Spirit to be with us here tonight. And Lord, first and foremost, we thank you for those wonderful, wonderful drops of water coming down the sky. It is so needed, and it is upon your blessing that we receive it. We ask your wisdom to be imparted upon our 5 city council members as they seek your guidance to make the decisions necessary to build our community so that it is filled with fellowship and love. That each decision they make be centered in values that do not seek elevating of self, but the lifting up of others. Lead them to act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with the knowledge that both history and you, Lord, will be their final judge. Lord, we thank you and ask your blessing upon our city manager and his staff who work diligently in meeting the needs of a growing city. God, I ask that you give them patience, endurance, a gentle spirit, knowledge, and above all, Lord, give them rest, for their job is difficult and pleasing all people is never an option. As our community gathers here tonight, Lord, give us a voice birthed from a heart filled with kindness and love, and let our face reflect that heart. Give us a will to fight for what is right and the spirit to do so, and thoughtful consideration of our neighbor and the many decisions that our city council faces. Now, Lord, as we begin this council meeting, we devote with a devout belief of the universal truth that we all belong to each other. I ask that you bless this meeting in my Savior, Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Thank you, David. Really appreciate that. All right. It is 6:02. Welcome to the October 25th. No,
November 8th.
it's November 8th. It's election day. That's okay, Gwen. Regular meeting, City of Lincoln, City Council, Redevelopment Successor Agency, Public Financing Authority. I call this meeting to order. I wanted to welcome staff and thank you for being here and welcome the public. When can we have roll call, please?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Joyner.
Here.
Councilmember Carl Skint.
Here.
Councilmember Lauritsen.
Here.
Councilmember Silhai.
Here.
And Mayor Andriotta.
Here, thank you. All right, item number 3, report from closed session.
There's no reportable action, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Item number 4, Pledge of Allegiance. Mark Andriotta, would you lead us, please? I'm going to put you on the spot. I know, thanks. All right, that's what I asked. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay. Item number 5, agenda modifications. Staff received a request we're going to move item 10B. We're going to move it after item 6 presentation. So we're going to move it up from the agenda, but it's going to be after item 6 presentations. Are there any other agenda modifications? Okay, thank you. All right, so then we're going to jump to item 6, presentations. We have one presentation this evening from Placer County Transportation Planning Agency and the Annual Unmet Transit Needs Assessment and 2050 Regional Transportation Plan. So Mike Costa, Senior Transportation Planner of PCTPA, will give the presentation, and welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, members of the City Council. Mike Costa with Placer County Transportation Planning Agency. It's a pleasure to be here on this rainy election day, but thank you again for having me. I wanted to share 2 very important projects that we're working on. Placer County Transportation Planning Agency, or PCTPA for short, is your regional transportation planning agency designated by the state of California to work with all of the jurisdictions in Placer County, including Placer County itself, to plan regional transportation projects and also secure federal and state and local dollars for those transportation projects. We're represented on our board by all of the jurisdictions in Placer County. Actually, Councilmember Joyner is on our PCTPA board. And again, we do cover all transportation issues on a regional level in Placer County, excluding the Tahoe Basin. One of the important projects that we're working on right now is the Regional Transportation Plan, or RTP for short. This is a plan that we are required to do as the state designated RTPA every 5 years. It's a plan that covers a 20+ year window. The current update that we're doing of the plan will extend all of the projects out to the year 2050 in terms of how those projects are put together and invested in our region. And the plan essentially outlines our county's collective priorities, goals, and strategies for the fiscally constrained plan that we have. And that's an important aspect to know about this plan, is we can't just throw every single project in the plan. The project does anticipate and forecast certain state, federal, and local revenues that we then prioritize and create transportation lists based on those anticipated revenues. And of course, one of the big important factors of the plan and why we update it every 5 years is because it does take a lot of public involvement and engagement with our local jurisdictions like the city of Lincoln to develop that plan. One of the presentations that you've had in the past from the Sacramento Area Council of Governments, or SACOG, was regarding their blueprint efforts and how this plan, the RTP, ties to those blueprint efforts essentially is that we are all creating the same project list. Our project list that we work on with your local jurisdictions for Placer County is fed into the SACOG blueprint plan. And the reason why it's done that way is because SACOG actually is the entity responsible as the MPO, or Metropolitan Planning Organization, for the 6-county region. They have to do all kinds of air quality conformity, and they have to actually model all of our plans and combine it with their sustainable community strategy, or SCS, which is a land use component that we don't consider, but our plan, our transportation investments combine with their land use component in their MTP SCS, known as the blueprint. So that's why you had a presentation from SACOG. We do our processes concurrent because at the end of the day, our transportation investments that we determine at the local level feed into that regional plan. And these plans are important because without them, we cannot secure the federal and state dollars that are needed to build our large scale infrastructure projects, which are multimodal in nature. They're train projects, transit projects, streets and roads, bike and ped, all of those projects that get federal and state funding have to be in these plans. So that's why these plans are important, and why we work very closely with your jurisdictions to make sure that your projects are reflected accordingly. We are growing very fast as a region. We anticipate a population of over 500,000 by the horizon year of our RTP. And we anticipate a lot of new job growth as well as new homes. Primarily, all of that will be occurring, most of that, I should say, will be occurring in the South Placer or western portion of our county. And then the other important aspect to look at in our last plan, which may or may not change in our new plan, is the commute patterns and how people travel between our county and Sacramento County. In the past plan, we recognized approximately 33% of our residents commuted outside of our county into Sacramento County for work. So that may be changing due to the pandemic and the post-pandemic impacts, but we'll be looking at that very closely. Again, looking back at this plan from 2040, we had approximately $6.9 billion of projects referenced in our last RTP. That was a financially constrained document. So that 6.9 billion was matched with 6.9 billion in revenue. And so we'll be looking again at what the new revenues are forecasted for the 2050 horizon year in our new plan. And you can see that the last plan divvied out that 6.9 billion into multimodal projects, from transit all the way to streets and roads to even administrative planning work. On a local level, some of the things that you would have seen around the city of Lincoln that were developed from the last plan, the Highway 65 widening project is something that we're actually working on right now, and anything to do with the Highway 65 and I-80 interchange is a project that is highly prioritized in our planning efforts in the past and also in this current plan. And then looking at streetscape improvements here at Lincoln, those projects were projects that were developed in coordination with the Regional Transportation Plan and your local jurisdiction's capital improvement program. As I mentioned, it's very important that this plan reflects your projects at the local level. So we do work with your local entities, primarily your public works staffs and also your development services staffs, to identify what are your existing plans for the community and how can they fit into the regional plan based on our forecasted revenues and growth. And then, of course, we also try to reflect local policies, local goals and objectives. Of course, we have local representation on our PCTPA board to form our plans, goals, and objectives for strategies and investments moving forward. Some of the things that we're looking at with the new plan are also the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IIJA, which is new. In 2021, it was passed, and it introduces potentially up to 30% more funding than past federal legislation has for transportation. So we're still digesting that and seeing how that would impact our transportation investments and the projects we put into our plan for 2050. And then also looking at, again, a potential local sales tax measure and how those revenues would factor into our plan. And predominantly those revenues would be tied to Lincoln, Rockland, and Roseville. Other things that we're considering aside from IIJA is the Climate Action Plan for Transportation Infrastructure, or CAPTI for short. That is a program that the state of California had passed in 2021. And essentially it's a new lens upon which we have to look at our transportation projects to see how they line up with the state's climate change adaptation goals and objectives, as well as how the benefits are tied to environmental justice and other factors that CAPTI considers. The reason why CAPTI is kind of important in this round is that new state programs that tie to our transportation investments all are starting to reference CAPTI, and they're all starting to say that CAPTI is a lens upon which projects are evaluated for funding. And since these are competitive projects, we have to look at how CAPTI may increase our chances of competitiveness, or how we need to look at our projects to increase their chances to bring them into that lens. The other thing that it's important to recognize, as I mentioned before, is this plan has to continue to help our region address federal and state regulations for greenhouse gas emission reductions. If we do not conform to those gas emission reductions at the 6-county level that this plan feeds into, it could potentially jeopardize federal and state funding. So we have to consistently look at that with our partners at SACOG. As we're doing right now, the biggest part of our plan involves everyone at the local level, your stakeholders, the community, and all across the region. We are trying to bring awareness of this planning effort. It's very important to us. We do actually have a survey that's live right now that can be taken through that link on the screen. And we are asking people to please share information about this that we have available to their friends or anyone that's interested in transportation investments here in the county, because this is an important effort that we want to make sure we have our priorities correct in this plan moving forward. We are also engaging in a couple virtual webinars that will be held on December 6th, 7th, and 8th. And then we are also doing as many pop-up events that are existing in local communities that we can pair up with or have a presence at to share information about this important planning process. Our schedule, I'm not going to go over all of it, but we do anticipate, after doing several rounds of public engagement over the next couple of years, we're hopeful that ultimately this plan will be adopted in late 2024. We are doing this process concurrent with the Sacramento Area Council of Governments. So if there are some delays on their end, we may have to push our plan out, but that is our current schedule right now. That kind of concludes that planning effort. I'm going to now jump into kind of a more annual planning effort that we're working on, which is called the Annual Unmet Transit Needs Assessment Process. Again, as the Regional Transportation Planning Agency for Placer County, we are required to administer what's called the Transportation Development Act, or TDA for short. That act produces two very important sources of revenue for the local communities. One is called local transportation funds, which is generated from a 1/4-cent general sales tax. Those local transportation funds are primarily intended for transit, but they can be used by your local jurisdictions for other purposes like street or road maintenance, which a lot of our local jurisdictions within Placer County use those funds for. The other source of funding is state transit assistance funds, which are generated from sale on gas and diesel, and those funds are primarily used for transit purposes. So One of the reasons why we have to do what's called an unmet transit needs assessment process is because in order for LTF or local transportation funds to be used for streets and roads purposes, we first have to determine if there's any unmet transit needs. And if there are any unmet transit needs, then those needs have to be satisfied before we can allocate LTF funding for streets and roads purposes. The STA funds, as I mentioned before, automatically go to transit services. So that's again why we have to do the unmet transit needs process. Our board actually adopts the definitions for both unmet transit needs as well as reasonable to meet criteria, that both of those factors have to be addressed in order for something to be actually determined as an unmet transit need that is then invested in. So unmet transit needs essentially are needs or services that do not exist or that have to exist because of certain regulations. So if there's something not existing, that is something that could be potentially an unmet transit need. However, we do look at that further for its reasonable to meet criteria. And that reasonable to meet criteria boils down to it has to be financially feasible, and it also has to be broadly supported. It can't just be a need for one or two people. It has to be a financially feasible, broadly supported need. That's essentially what those reasonable to meet criteria boils down to. In the past, just at a local level, back in 2019, there was an unmet transit need here in this region. It was for cross-jurisdictional ADA dial-a-ride service. So that is something that gives you perspective on how unmet transit needs come to fruition in this region. In terms of our schedule, this process typically begins with outreach and engagement that we do starting in either September or October. For this cycle, we actually started the unmet transit needs assessment with a public survey that is live. It started in October and it will go through November 18th. We encourage anybody in the region that has a potential unmet transit need to please take that survey. And that survey then will close on the 18th, by which we will then evaluate all of the comments that we receive based on the criteria I just showed you. And that's evaluated in conjunction and collaboration with our transit operators. And it's also looked at with our Social Service Transportation Advisory Council. I know that's a tongue twister, which consists of a lot of local stakeholders and social service agencies that provide transportation in the region. So we're all looking at those potential unmet transit needs for whether or not they're reasonable to meet. After we do that and we make that analysis, we then present those findings to our board to adopt. And if there are any unmet transit needs that are reasonable to meet, we have to address those after the adoption of those findings. If not, then the funding can all be allocated to streets and roads purposes. As I mentioned, there's many ways to get involved. The survey is what I highly encourage people to do. However, if they want to reach out to me directly, my contact information is available on the screen. And also they can take the survey if they need to in Spanish and Tagalog, which is available on our website. With that, I am happy to answer any questions. That concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Appreciate that. Are there any questions or comments from the council?
I was just going to say thank you for making it so succinct and easy to follow. It was a great presentation.
Bill, go
I
ahead.
just have one question. Unmet transportation needs, is commuting between like here and Roseville and Rockland to downtown Sacramento, does that ever come up as an unmet transportation need?
It can in a general broad perspective. The question that really we boil down to if that need comes up, and we're actually looking at studies to increase services between Lincoln and Sacramento via, I don't know if you've heard of the South Placer Transit Express service that's being developed, and it will be administered by Roseville, and hopefully that comes online next fall. But essentially, we look at more specific unmet transit needs. For instance, if someone is lacking service altogether, like if they're in a region such as maybe Sheridan, where there are very limited services, those are more in line with unmet transit needs versus just increasing existing services that already allow you to travel from, say, Lincoln to Sacramento.
But there isn't any any commuter buses between, say, Lincoln and Sacramento directly?
There is no direct service, but Placer County Transportation or Transit Service, PCT for short, does provide connections that can get you to Sacramento from Lincoln.
How long does it take?
I think it can take an hour or more. Yeah. Roughly 2
Yeah.
hours.
I'm just thinking about like a commuter service between, say, Lincoln.
Yeah.
We have a parking lot, over on Lincoln Boulevard, and maybe a trip, the downtown, just saving, like 20 cars going, 20 or 30 cars having to go down to downtown Sacramento.
Yeah. And again, I'd
Coming
like to.
back at night,
Yeah, I'd like to emphasize that South Placer Transit Project, it's going to be administered by the city of Roseville. It will be starting here in Lincoln, and it will be going down to the Watt I-80 light rail station with only 3 stops in between.
Okay.
So it is meant to be an express service. I think it runs every 30 minutes. It's
Yeah.
anticipated that that'll begin in fall of next year.
So it'll be going from here to the light rail station.
Yes,
Okay.
Think bus rapid transit, right?
yes.
Plus,
The first of our kind in this region.
I'll let everybody else go first. Couple of questions.
Your microphone, Dan.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Couple of questions on the goals and some of the issues that have changed. The VMT in particular. You just said VMT analysis. What does that mean?
So
Is it the magic formula between level of service, LOS, and you plug in 2 variables and it gives you VMT?
So from a broad perspective, in regards to the way this plan looks at what's called VMT analysis, or vehicle miles traveled analysis is what VMT stands for, is the state of California, in their past legislation that was mentioned on the slide, identified that level of service was no longer the mechanism by which jurisdictions should look at congestion. They should look at projects from the sense of how they impact vehicle miles traveled. That is something we don't control at the local level. It's something that's tied to a lot of our federal and state funding sources. And so when I mentioned that in the slide, or when you saw it in the slide, what we have to look at still is how are our projects addressing or impacting vehicle miles traveled? Do they lead? There is very specific modeling that can be done on the local level that can identify how a project impacts VMT. And so our project lens that we have to look at when we're putting together our lists of investments is, are our projects significantly increasing that VMT? Because if they are, that may be something that the state would push back on. But that's something we work very closely with your local jurisdictions. And keep in mind that we've already looked at a lot of the projects in the 2050 RTP will be carried over from the 2040 RTP. And that VMT analysis has also already been done at the 2040 level. So it really only captures the VMT between 2040 and 2050, if that makes sense, for this new plan.
Okay, so there's no evaluation pre the 2040.
It's evaluated collectively as part of the environmental impact report that'll have to be done for this new plan. But what was evaluated in the past is still relevant to what is being evaluated in the new plan, if that makes sense. So we're not necessarily expecting any surprises unless there's significantly new projects that change VMT between the years 2040 and 2050, which I don't anticipate at this time, but there may be, we'll have to look at that when the time comes. But we do have to assess VMT as part of the environmental impact report for the whole plan when that comes along.
Okay, then the next question is, the inclusion of equity and environmental justice. Again, you've got projects and programs that have been in the BCTP planning for years that did not have that lens applied to them. How are you going to go back and do it? How does it, I don't understand how it's all going to work.
Yeah, so that's a very good question. We are still working on that on a regional level. There are a lot of efforts I know that SACOG is kind of rolling out different programs and also different strategies to address some of that on a 6-county level. On a regional level, we're still looking at that. We're still trying to evaluate how does equity, how does environmental justice tie into our local conditions and our local priorities. I don't have that answer for you, unfortunately, tonight, but it is something we have to look at in the lens of our plan to see how can we address that in the local level? And how can we still advocate for, like you mentioned, our existing projects that have been in many different iterations of this plan every 5 years? So we'll be looking at that, and we are cognizant that we shouldn't have to drop plans and projects that are already in our plan and that we're just carrying over because we're advancing them in the years.
Maybe I can jump in, Dan, at least on a local level a little bit. Environmental justice, for me at least, it took me a while to get to this point, is a misnomer. It sounds like something it shouldn't be. But in the case of Lincoln, I can come up with 2 instances of what I would call an environmental justice need, given that moniker. The first would be the neighborhoods that were divided by Highway 65 along Moore Road. How do we reconnect them? The impacts of Highway 65 are that environmental justice. They divided that community. So whether it's a bike ped tunnel under 65, whatever it might be, how do we reconnect that? The other, most obvious to me, our city is split by a railroad. How do we resolve some of those issues and reconnect the 2 sides of our city? And I think that really is the type of environmental justice we're looking at least here in Placer County. That work?
Yeah. I think about that. That changes.
Yeah, in downtown, the biggest one in the entire region, which will never be addressed, is I-5 split Sacramento from the riverfront. There's a solution. They can deck over that. They'll never do it. It's too expensive.
Was there anything else you wanted to add?
Just a comment, the goals and considerations and the items that Dan was just talking about, the environmental justice and the equity, those are not discussions that the board has yet had. I just wanted to make that clear. Probably it sounds like it's going to rise to the board from staff, but at this point in time, that's not a conversation the board is having.
Doesn't sound like staff has any choice but to raise it.
Yeah, I think that's true. You see it come down from the feds to the state to us. Well, to SACOG and then SACOG to us, and you do have no choice.
Yeah, it rolls downhill.
Right.
Yeah, I was just going to double down on that, that I appreciate the efforts and the careful efforts of the board and the staff, because a lot of the things that we're talking about, they're mandates, a lot of them are unfunded mandates. They're things that are no considerations that they're required to be included. And that conversation continues to roll at the state level. There was legislation this year that was wanting to strip funding of any project that didn't directly match state climate goals. That bill got stopped. It's probably going to come back. More will probably materialize that are like that. So as this is an update every 5-year plan and the state continues to roll on, these are things that we will, whether you like it, you don't like it, or you have concerns or questions, they're just part of the process now.
Thank you for that. All right, thank you so much. Let's go to public comment. We'll start with Zoom. Are there any hands raised on Zoom? Gwen?
No, Mayor, no hands are
Okay,
raised.
Are there any comments in the chambers? Mr. Chapman, go right ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members, Byron Chapman, 12 Bridges area. It being the environmental scenario, the larger picture of it, as our state and others try to get more in line with cars that are driven by the electricity versus the combustible engine. I wonder if there's any factors that do affect that. I mean, if the ratio is, as I read, the state of California is certainly trying to get more and more down onto the electric field. Is that a consideration? And if so, where does that fall into that whole issue? Does it become moot if 75% of the commuters are on their own electrical cars or not? So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Costa, can you comment on that question?
I would like to acknowledge that that's a very good question. And in short, that is something that SACOG is looking at, since they are the entity that models our air quality conformity and how the adoption and purchasing and acquiring of EV vehicles, electric vehicles in the future, how that brings down potentially our greenhouse gas emissions versus traffic-induced greenhouse gas emissions. So we're still looking at that, and we don't have an answer for that just yet.
Thank you.
It's a bit of a rough one. The discussions I've had down at SACOG suggest that the state sees the EVs as their portion of the solution. And the 19% greenhouse gas reduction the 6-county region has to go through is something separate from the state's EV efforts.
Oh,
So,
well, that sounds fair.
mhm.
Are there any other comments in the council chambers? All right, bring it back to council. Thank you very much for that. That was a great presentation. We really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, we're going to move to item 10B that we had originally talked about. And first of all, I would really like to welcome county staff, Ken Grimm and Kevin Bell, and Supervisor Bonnie Gore for being here with us. So item 10B is to adopt resolution 2022-256. And this is number 1, approve the Lincoln Sewer Maintenance District 1 Wastewater Authority Joint Powers Agreement and authorize the city manager to execute the agreement subject to city attorney and risk management concurrence. And number 2, appoint 2 council members and 1 alternate to serve as members of the Lincoln Sewer Maintenance District 1 Wastewater Authority Board of Directors. And number 3, authorize the city manager or designee to execute such documents and take such actions as are necessary to implement this Lincoln Sewer Maintenance District 1 Wastewater Authority Joint Powers Agreement. And City Manager Sean Scully, you're going to give this presentation?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
If it's okay, I think I'll go up to this.
Perfect.
Okay, good evening, Mayor and Council. So this is like a rerun again, but I'm going to move through it a little more quickly. The slides are mostly the same. There's just a few little additions and clarifications that we tried to keep our information generally consistent with what was presented to the Placer County Board of Supervisors last week. Okay, real quickly, the history and issues. So as we've discussed, this arrangement known as COJA goes back about 10 years. It started with a decision at a cooperation agreement between the 2 agencies that Lincoln would treat SMD1's wastewater flow. It included a very large scale project to construct and install a force main all the way down to our plant. And in May of 2016, improvements were completed, and we've been treating that wastewater ever since. Here's a picture again of the pipe run. Probably will allow the county engineers who are here this evening to more specifically explain that, but that blue box in the lower left-hand corner is our plant. So just a little bit of background for those who haven't been tracking this issue. We currently here at the city combine wastewater collections, which is essentially the piping that goes from your home to the plant, and treatment into one bill that you pay just one charge on your utility bill. We also bill the county for treatment operations and maintenance of the SMD1 facility, although that's changing, and I'll get to that in just a moment. Fixed O&M charges to the county did not cover city costs, which has been unsustainable in the long term. Repair and rehabilitation costs were additive to the O&M charges, making budgeting very difficult for us, and we've seen that over a number of years. Structural deficit exists within the Lincoln Wastewater Enterprise Fund. There's a variety of reasons for this, but the most simple answer is that we haven't addressed rates in about 10 years. The plant is reaching capacity and expansion is needed. I'll have a little more detail on that in a future slide, and additional funds are needed to pay for that expansion. As part of an ongoing effort to resolve those core COJA issues, a new model was discussed by this 2x2 committee that started a little over a year ago, I think now. And I think in the initial discussions, and Councilmember Carlson can probably speak more to this, there's probably a variety of different ideas. As we worked through the process, the idea of a joint powers authority was explored as we participate in other JPAs here regionally. And we wanted to think about what the best path forward was, given the gravity of the expansion that's needed at this time. We'll get into some of the deal points, but generally the board is proposed to be comprised of 2 members from each governing body, 2 board of supervisors and 2 city council members. And as I mentioned, the growth in our area, not only in the city, but also in the county, is an important reason that this model was looked at. And the JPA also they will take on full responsibility in terms of operations, but also in terms of liabilities and regulatory compliance moving forward. So as we really explored this, we had to come up with some, we called them tenets at the time. I think now we're calling them the sustainable principles, but it's basically agreed concepts that govern how we move forward if we move forward in this format. All for one, one for all. We have had long-standing debates and discussions with the county about how we evaluate what an EDU is in the city and what an EDU is in the county. For those who don't know what that term means, it's equivalent dwelling unit. Councilmember Carlson and I like to call it a sewer unit. It's basically a specific amount that we treat. And that's how we identify not only what our loadings are and how much capacity we have, but also how we build. And so the idea moving forward is that all EDUs are the same, regardless of where the toilet is being flushed, so to speak. Aligned interest is the second. What is good for one is good for the other, and what is bad for one is bad for the other. So trying to make sure that the decisions that we're making on either side are going to work for both parties. And then shared obligations and responsibilities in the existing and future system for all ratepayers. So unlike the current scenario, where it's more of a vendor-customer relationship, if approved, the JPA would essentially create shared obligations and responsibilities for the county as well as the city. We sort of now are joined at the hip, so to speak. So the process of formation, we developed business points. We engaged the 2x2 and the technical advisory group, engaged outside counsel that specializes in JPA formation. This is the step we're at now, consideration of approval by the city council and the board of supervisors. If approved, the very, very next step will be to select an interim general manager and finance director. I didn't add in, but also legal counsel. And then over the next 60 to 90 day period, we're be going through a variety of different legal hoops to transfer assets to the JPA and really stand up the agency. Finally, the JPA's most important first matter of business after the house cleaning is done is to establish charges and start the expansion project as soon as possible. Proposed business points, you can see all of these in the agreement that is attached to your agenda, but as I said, the JPA will own and operate the regional wastewater facility. They will employ their own agents and employees. Now, those could be staff, those could be contractors. It could be exactly the same as the current scenario. That will be up to the 4 members of that body. They will establish charges and other costs in connection with the regional facilities and notify the agencies of the updated costs. Very similar to how WAPMA does their cost setting. They will charge this county and city for our proportionate fees based on the number of respective equivalent dwelling units within each jurisdiction. So this is just to ensure that it truly is fair and everybody's paying their fair share of the cost to provide the service. The JPA will develop and adopt policies and procedures. Already talked about how it's governed and have the authority to change the agreement based on a unanimous vote from the JPA board. There's also a variety of other major decisions that are outlined in the agreement that require unanimous votes. And we talked about that at length. The idea was to make sure that this didn't turn into something where the needs of one agency or the other were holding up progress at the JPA level. And so it sort of forces the parties to work together. Current situation at the wastewater treatment plant is we are nearing capacity. It's projected to handle existing and pre-sold units, but we will need it to handle any future development. And as you all know, we have plenty of that on the horizon. And current reserves will not fund the totality of the expansion. Expansion is estimated to cost $59 million. The last time I gave you this report, it was $58 million. So it's ticking up. Maybe completed all at once or as part of 2 phases. I'm going to speak a little bit more about that. The first, if you were to, I think practically there's absolutely no way financially that we could afford to do the entire project at once. It would blow our rates exponentially high. So the idea we've looked into is a phased approach, and both phases combined are estimated to give us about 10,000 units, equivalent dwelling units of capacity. So the idea is you could either do project A, or phase A, at 43 million, which gives you 8,000 units, or what we're leaning towards more now as we've explored it is do project B, which is much less expensive at 35 million, provides 4,000 units of equivalent dwelling unit capacity. We will collect fees on those 4,000 units. And the idea, at least for now, is that we pay essentially cash for the second phase of the expansion. But again, that's something that the JPA would have to sort out amongst the board. There's just some pros and cons that are pretty self-evident. If you could do the project all at once, you're certainly going to save because you're going to be able to build at current cost. And if you put some of that project out into the future, you will be dealing with increased construction costs in the future. However, you could see that the pros of doing one or the other phase as a first phase gives you a lower initial costs and treatment charge and allows us to build that connection fee bank to pay for the second phase. I'm not going to have Nita come up here again and explain her pro forma because I think we've kind of gone through that a number of times unless council would like that. But in short, basically what we did was we worked with the county on trying to build what we thought the organization that doesn't exist yet, the JPA, would need in order to operate on a yearly basis. And we're in a good position to do that because we already know what it costs today. So it is slightly more expensive if you were to look at, if we didn't transform this service into a JPA and kept it as is, the overhead cost is the primary driver. Is very minimal in the space of how expensive this service is to run. So the estimates that Nita and I have is that you probably are going to expect roughly 6% in administrative and overhead costs to run this operation. And so you'd think, well, geez, 6% more than the alternative, what is currently, it's not really the right way to analyze that because our current treatment system already has administrative and overhead costs that it's paying for. So it's very difficult for us to know the net difference. We think it probably comes in around 2 or 3% net difference. Here's some financial statistics for year one. We believe operating expenses are going to be in the $7.8 million range. We also split out debt expenses because a large portion of the budget moving forward, if we move forward with bonding for this project, will be debt coverage over that term. And then you see the capital expenses. The reason that dollar figure is so high is it assumes that you spend a large bond in the first year to build out the phase one of the project. So this is a slide that sort of shows what we think we're looking at in terms of rates as it relates to various options that we may or may not get when we go out for a bond and absorb that debt. We still feel that we have a pretty conservative viewpoint at 5.5%. It may be that based on the rating that we receive, that amount is lower. Even a half a percentage point matters a whole lot when you're taking out over $40 million in debt. However, just to be really clear, because we've talked about this a few times before, and we just want to be as completely transparent as possible. The debt-related expenses that will be added to the monthly utility bill is roughly $12.41. So O&M, $20 and change, R&R, which is rehabilitation, repair, $1.42, brings you out to $34.56. When you add that together with collections, which will also increase, the total impact to the City of Lincoln ratepayer is about 105% difference between today and if and when those rates are approved. And to be very clear, we don't see that it is different regardless of the decision on JPA. Numbers are the numbers.
The rates will be the same.
Yeah. These are connection fees. We can go into these if you'd like, but we've kind of talked through them quite a bit too, of sort of what we did a little bit of forecasting in terms of growth and try to get an idea about when we could build up enough revenue to potentially pay for phase 2 expansion. Okay, real quickly, I committed throughout the process to try to be as neutral and unbiased as possible, although I've worked on this project for 8 months. And so I'm going to go through some advantages that we see, and then I'll go through some disadvantages. As we've talked about, charges are set adequately to be sustainable into the future. They incorporate all of the things that we should be doing on a normally professionally run wastewater treatment facility. They are intended to align county and city into establish something that's a little more sustainable moving forward. To create a specialized JPA that's sole focus is the efficient delivery of services. And so one of the kind of more philosophical things we've talked about a lot recently is, the City of Lincoln is essentially a full service city. We contract for some minor things like I think we do animal control and some of the more minor services, but in general, we provide every other service internally. That said, for a very long time, the city has never really fully funded and managed treatment in the way that you would want to, especially moving forward with future expansions. And by that, I mean, we have contracted out services for the labor at the plant, which is fine. But what we haven't done over time is assigned or appointed or hired somebody to be the staff side manager of that service. Wastewater is a highly technical field. It usually requires somebody, it requires somebody with a certain grade certificate to be the legally responsible official at the plant. And we have always met that need through contractors, which has been fine. The problem on the administration side is that we haven't had eyes on it from my perspective for a long time. And so when an expansion creeps up on you, what you'd hope if you rewound 5 years is that somebody in that role would have said, hey, as I look at building permit activity, we need to be getting to work on expansion like now in 2017. So that's one major benefit from my perspective. You think there's potential for more transparency and oversight? This will be a clearinghouse for all things wastewater treatment. It creates a mechanism to theoretically resolve conflicts with the county as partners versus a customer-vendor relationship. We discussed that. And then, of course, there's a liability and transfer of risk to a third party. I generally don't view wastewater as an overly risky service, but certainly there are things that happen from time to time, spills and permit violations that can create liability. Oops, drawbacks. And we've talked about this as well. I'm just being as open as possible. The concerns about the potential to separate goals within the JPA format, depending on jurisdiction, the perception that Lincoln is giving away an asset. Placer County will have less and less of a percentage share of the plant as Lincoln grows over time, and the concerns may be raised over equal voting power by county. Navigation of complexity and establishing true equity given a vast difference in land use and billing structure. Some overhead costs, as we've discussed, will now need to be absorbed directly by the collection system that are partially being blended into treatment if it moves outside of our direct umbrella. And the perception that additional government is being created that may cost slightly more than the current operational expenditures. each and every single one of those points, which have been made by a variety of individuals, including me over the time, I think are valid and worthy of some discussion. But I will say that over time, the process of putting this together has given me some encouragement, because it's been a very complicated, difficult road. Every time that we thought we had it pretty much on the fast track, we would run into some problem with a study or some engineering related issue, or costs were rising so fast we had to go back to the drawing board and rethink it. And every single step of that process has been met with some good collaboration with our county partners. Finally, here are the options. Council to consider approval of the attached resolution, which approves the JPA agreement for the formation of LISWA, I think is what we're calling it. The next steps, if approved, would be that we literally go into action immediately. Thursday at 10:30 a.m. Right here in this chambers, we would have the first LISWA Board of Directors meeting. At that meeting, there's going to be some consideration of general manager, legal, and finance functions, and then we'll start to talk about asset transfer. Alternatives, do not approve the resolution and provide us alternate direction for a path forward, or continue this to a future meeting date and request additional data, which we'd be happy to do as well. Lastly, and then I'll take questions, I just wanted to thank Ken and Kevin and Robin from County Engineering, Supervisor Gore and Holmes, Councilmember Lauritsen, Councilmember Carlson, Mayor Andriotta, all of whom have served in various functions on this. Our team, Christine, Angela, Travis, Jen, Nita. It's been a real heavy lift for us. We've literally built this from the ground up in less than 8 months. And so regardless of the decision this evening, I'm super proud of the effort, and I've really enjoyed even the frustration of it. So I'm happy to answer any questions and or just take comments. Oh, and one last thing, Mayor. We also, if it is to be approved, there needs to be nominations for the 2 members on. And the
Yeah,
alternate.
that's on our list here. Thank you very much. All right. Who wants to go first?
Bill raised his hand.
Yeah. Sean, we have some questions for you. I appreciate your presentation. I understand why we have to expand the plant. And I'm very interested, because it's something that, we definitely do need, and it looks like, it's necessary. My point is, why the JPA? Okay, how many new employees will that entail? Other than, above and beyond what we have now?
It is likely, based on current discussions, that it doesn't change your employee count or equivalent employees, because we contract for the operation services. What it will change is you'll have, it's anticipated that there's probably a part-time general manager, a part-time finance, probably a firm that runs the books. I mean, it's not a very complicated finance system, because they really only have 2 customers. So we don't see it to be a whole lot. And then third would be some legal. So we don't actually view that there's probably any full-time equivalent staff, at least in the initial years.
The initial years.
Mhm.
Okay. Why can't we continue doing what we're doing?
You can't. I think that the problem is that it hasn't, from the perspective of many of the members on the committee, it hasn't worked. And we sit at the precipice of needing to make some serious decisions about how we're going to expand the plant. And even at 25% of capacity, Placer County is a pretty important player in that, if we're going to move forward. But to me, it's not a binary decision. It's not an either or. There are advantages and drawbacks to both perspectives.
We have expanded the plant before. The city have expanded. I mean, expanded the plant, bonded it, and and then charged the county for its equivalent usage.
Could we have done that?
Yes.
Yeah, we could have done it.
Well, if you remember, the reason we are in this in the first place is because we had issues with the existing COJA with SMD1. And so if we chose not to do this today, we're going to have to go right back to the beginning, and we still have the same issues that we did before. And then to your other question about the staffing, one of the benefits that I think is that because our staff has so many other things to deal with, if the council approves this, once this JPA is formed, that's going to move it off their plate and Sean can focus on all the other things, the airport, other things that we have to do. And it's gonna alleviate, it'll still be, our thing, but it's gonna alleviate that burden off of our staff's shoulders.
Seems to me we're giving up a lot of authority with this. I mean, giving the county, it looks like, we got 2-to-1 now as far as, usage of plan. And after Village 1 and Village 5 come online, it was gonna be something like 85% city. But we're giving the county an equal share in power.
Yeah, that issue's been brought up. I mean, it was one of my potential drawbacks on the slide. I guess I would say that there are plenty of other examples. I think if you look at plenty of really well-run JPAs where, usually there are more members than just 2, but it's regardless of your size of your jurisdiction, you get 1 vote. It's not weighted depending on their population. I think that's how WAPMA works, right? I'm not sure, but it's a right. So, and then there was some significant discussion. I'll let Councilmember Carlson explain that, but there was significant discussion about whether it should be 2-2, should it be 2 city council members and 1 board of supervisor. There was some Brown Act considerations about how you really have a functioning body with only 3 folks and you can't even talk to 1 other person and it's a violation. But you would.
Well, like a lot of things in this process, the 2x2 is a compromise. If you had the board configured on a proportional basis, you would have a 2-1, 2 Lincoln people and 1 county person. But then you run into very serious Brown Act problems. As a person in that situation, you have no other director that you can talk to. And that enough, because I'm in one of those already. PCCP is 2-1 flipped. I can't talk to my other directors. And it's very frustrating because there are questions and there are things you'd like to toss back and forth. In the case of the 2x2, you can talk to somebody. Secondly, with the way the voting's set up, it takes, for anything significant, like rate changes, it takes 100% unanimous 4-person vote. So whether you have 3 or 2, it doesn't matter, which is the way PCCP is set up. It takes a unanimous vote to do anything important. We looked at, and you were there, Bill, we looked at service districts, which is another way of doing this. We looked at customer vendor relationship was not acceptable to almost anybody that was in the meetings. We looked at other modifications to JPAs. I forget what they were called, but we, in the first set of meetings, that was what was centered around. It's what type of governance. And everybody, I thought, including you, because you didn't object or even make any comments, I thought everybody was okay with going down the path of the JPA. As proportional, I know of only one JPA, if you will, that had a proportional vote in the county. My knowledge is limited to that. And they reverted to a one vote per member simply because the time that the first time they had to use a proportional vote, nobody was satisfied, including me. Anyway. So they immediately switched to one person per vote. Yes.
You
Well-
mentioned the fact that I didn't raise any objections. Actually, I did at the first meeting, and I raised the objections to Supervisor Gore. I didn't see any reason for it, but, you spoke and you said, you were trying to convince us. I still haven't been convinced that we really need a JPA, why we can't keep doing what we're doing. Another reason is too, the distribution of the cost by EDU, which is sort of a strange method, the equivalent dispersed dwelling units. Why can't you just have, why can't we just have a meter, between the two?
That's why I want to call it a sewer unit rather than EDU. It's a measure of volume and density, period.
Measure units, right?
Pardon me?
Equivalent units, equivalent dwellings as opposed to.
No, well, no,
flow.
that's what an EDU means.
Mhm.
And the definition of an EDU for wastewater treatment and for in the future and for now is a measure of flow combined with a measure of density. Those two together, a number 5 here and a number 3 there, make an EDU, make a sewer unit or an EDU. Generally, a residential single-family dwelling will use that capacity, which is why it got started being called an EDU.
I just not have a meter. So
Don, you want to speak to that?
Sure. So the cost to put a sewer meter on every single connection in both jurisdictions would probably, I'm looking at Travis, would be more than our entire expansion project, I would guess.
Whoa.
More or
I
less.
didn't say every single unit. I said, just 2 meters, one us and one the county before it goes into the plant.
Oh, you mean at the trunk lines?
Yes.
Well, we do have monitoring stations in both SMD1 and we already know what our flows are. So
Why is that the method for distributing costs?
well, because you have to figure out how you're going to, EDU function is not only a way for us to figure out the proportionate share between the two agencies, but how you bill it to the customer. So for example, a wet user that is industrial in nature, they're going to probably be worth, I don't know, 70 EDUs versus my house is just one. And so the function is useful from an accounting perspective to make sure that we're billing appropriately. But
There's only 2 customers now, the city and the county.
right, but we have to pass the cost on to the
Exactly.
customer. Yeah.
So that could be that's our duty actually to charge customers.
Correct.
I'm just talking about distributing the cost in the county and the city.
Well, so I guess I'm a little bit confused. The problem is that you could do that. And in fact, the data that we use is sort of reversed into that. They know generally what comes into those stations. I'm looking over at the 2 people that have worked a lot on EDUs that could probably speak to this more intelligently than me.
One thing to note is that with our EDU calculations, it's not just volumetric, it's also concentrations. So looking at 2 different sources just strictly on volumetric, obviously a more concentrated flow is going to require more treatment. It's going to have higher costs and it needs to be accounted for. It's a 2-component calculation when we assign EDUs.
So in other words, Travis, density and flow.
Alyssa, did you have comment? Are you done, Bill? Okay.
That's okay.
I kind of like to hear from the public before we all get
Yeah,
into
let's
it.
do it.
You want to hear from the public first before you? Okay. All right, let's open up to public comment. Any hands raised on Zoom?
No, Mayor, no hands are raised.
Okay, any comments from the council chambers? Supervisor Gore.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Supervisor Bonnie Gore, unfortunately Supervisor Holmes had another meeting this evening, so he couldn't join us. But I want to first just say thank you for the effort that's been put forth with Lincoln staff, county staff, Councilmember Carl Skent, Mayor Andreata, Councilmember Lauritsen as well. This has not been an easy process, a long process to get to a place where, you know, we had two entities that weren't working well together as a customer vendor process. The COJA didn't work. And the fact that we're actually talking about working together to make sure we actually have reliable service for the residents in Lincoln, for the residents in SMD 1 in North Auburn, it is really terrific. And I really want to say thank you to your staff who are really sharp. And the fact that they worked really well with our team, it just says a lot. It is not easy to do joint powers authorities. And I understand that this is a tough decision on your behalf. And I know that when you came in, Mayor Andreata, you asked a lot of questions, which was okay. And it was good because we had to come back and make sure there was agreement and lots of conversations about all the different items about how many people should be on the JPA and how we go about this. But I really feel like this was an effort between two jurisdictions who really saw at the end of the day, everyone needed to win. We had to make sure that our customers got service, that we had staff that could run the agency, a growing agency. This agency will continue to grow because we have more houses coming to the jurisdictions. And so I just really appreciate the effort. It's really, I've learned more about wastewater than I ever thought I would. But I also saw people willing to do hard work to do something that will benefit the community in the long run. And I really appreciate that. If this moves forward and your board moves forward with approving the JPA, then the Board of Supervisors has at this point appointed Supervisor Holmes and Supervisor Wygant, who has this area in his district to be the representatives for the JPA, which I think is terrific. I told him it's nice that I get to step aside after all the hard work has been done. But once again, appreciate your consideration of this. And I really appreciate the hard questions and the fact that we got to this place this evening.
Thank you, Supervisor Gore. Appreciate that. Any other comments in the council chambers? Okay, back to you all. Go for it.
Right. I think I want to echo, first of all, a lot of the comments that have been made in chambers and by Supervisor Gore. This has been a huge effort by both staffs, and regardless of how this turns out tonight, I want you all to know how very much we appreciate it. I know that our previous interim city manager thought this would be a 2-year process, and Sean and his team and the county have been able to get this done in 10 months and bring it before us. So that is massive. Thank you for that. This is a tough call for me. I can argue both sides of this equally. And to be fair, I think I've got 2 areas of concern. One is the governance model. If we're being honest, the city and the county have not worked well together often in the past. And my comparison for Sean was, one of the arguments here is this will force us to work together. My comment to Sean was that's a little like a couple that's not getting along well, thinking that getting married is going to fix it. It's not. So I have some real concerns there. The 2 and 2 concerns me. I disagree with Dan on his logic behind that. There is no Brown Act violation if you call a meeting, it can be a workshop in which everybody can sit and talk. The need to talk behind the scenes without the public is not a priority for me. It's being able to have those discussions, and there is a vehicle for that. A little more cumbersome, a little more burden to it, but certainly far more transparent. And I think that's essential as you stand up an organization like this. Beyond that, I will say this. And I came into this meeting still not knowing which way I'm going to go, and I've still got some hesitations here, but one thing I do know is that municipalities are not very good at running utilities, and I think we've demonstrated that. The argument that a JPA singularly focused on, in this case, providing wastewater services. That's the only thing they're doing. That's the only thing they're focused on. Makes good sense to me. I think that in the long run, and that's what we really are talking about, not the next couple of years, but this endeavor as we grow, as PCTPA said, to 500,000 people, most of that right down here on the southwestern side of Placer County by 2050. This has always been called regional sewer. Whether we call it that officially or not, it's always been a concept of a regional sewer. There have been discussions in the past of whether Thunder Valley could join in, whether other entities could join in. And within this agreement is the opportunity for additional partners down the road. So there'll be, if that happens, there'll be revisits on that governance model. The governance model makes me very uncomfortable, and I don't know that absent shifting that discomfort is going to go away for me. But I do think when we talk about bringing it in-house or setting up a JPA that is singularly focused on this, the scales come down for me on the JPA side.
Councilman Sahai.
Yeah, I share the discomfort with the governance structure. That's no secret. We've talked about it a lot and a lot and a lot. I don't like it. I agree with your statement on it. I think particular to Councilmember Lordson's point, as the city continues to grow, as the use of the facility continues to grow out, it's going to be 80–90% Lincoln. And so having that proportional vote concerns me, but it concerns me because when, and I don't like to go backwards and harp on old business, but when you say that, two entities that didn't work well together, it was one entity that wasn't working well with us. We tried very, very, very hard. I mean, very hard, to the point of, and this is all public, we've all discussed this ad nauseum for 2 years now. This facility needed to be expanded 2 years ago. We needed to address COJA 2 years ago. We tried every single trick up our sleeve to be able to make that happen. We had to literally file a lawsuit and go to mediation to get the county to work with us. And it was met with a lot of obstruction and consternation that I personally fielded those phone calls to my cell phone. So you can't say it didn't happen. It's gross that we had to go through that to get here. Where we are now feels like a breath of fresh air, because we're working together. Our staffs are working together. Commend you for how hard you worked to get here, how hard our staff worked to get here. The idea that it would take 2 years for people to be able to work together to do what's in the public's interest, it should never happen that way. And so if this makes that stop, all I care about is that we have reliable services that are high quality, that fulfill the needs of the community and the residents who choose to live in Placer, who choose Lincoln, who choose the, Auburn area of influence up there. They move there for a reason. They buy a house, maybe have a family, and all they want is for their toilets to flush. And they want all of their facilities to work right, and they want their infrastructure upgraded, and they don't want old, I'm going to say almost endemic dysfunction between two entities to get in the way of that. And that is what has happened on a lot of things. There have been so many different choke points between Lincoln and the county, and maybe this is an opportunity for Lincoln and the county to come together and not have those choke points anymore, because it's a common goal. And the reason it's a common goal is because it's also shared responsibility, which means that everyone's in it together. So on that way, right, I get, yeah, maybe it's a great thing that everyone is equally liable. On the other hand, I will say I share a lot of hesitation, because with the 2-2, all it takes, and the 100%, everyone unanimous vote, what happens when 90% of our area, and we need the expansion, but like, maybe the county has other things that they're leveraging and that they want projects to go through, or there's things that are in conflict that are in other choke points, and that gets held up. That, unfortunately, sometimes is the way government functions, and that's not peculiar to Lincoln or the county or anywhere else. That is just a lot of times local government dynamics where there's varying interests, and everybody wants to get what they want to get out, and they use whatever leverage they have. I am hesitant that our services become leverage. So that is where I have some hesitation on the governance structure, just thinking that that could potentially be built in. But to your point, having it be a regional facility, getting rid of all of the old, that's 2 years of things that hopefully were past and it doesn't ever materialize again. And if we get to prop up a new organization and new relationships and hopefully new efficiencies, where it doesn't take 2 years to get an expansion to happen when we know it needs to happen, and that JPA board is able to make those decisions and plan for them and put them into the rates and do their job. Honestly, that sounds like it might be in the benefit of everybody. And to your point, cities don't do utilities well most of the time. And even if they do them well, usually an entity that just does that one thing, they do it better. So I'm kind of with you. I'm kind of all over the board on it. I could argue it either way. I do have significant concerns down one vein. I think it's hard to let go of some of why we had to get here, but I do think it's an opportunity to move forward from it.
I will say to your point, when I came into this process, as Supervisor Gore had mentioned, I had a lot of questions and I shared a lot of the same concerns. But what I have seen is very positive. I've seen the supervisors and I've seen the staff on both sides work through every question, through every issue, very cooperatively, very friendly. Sometimes, I came in and I threw a wrench, and they were very good about, that's a good question, Holly, and we'll talk about it again, even though they've been talking about it for a year already. They were very happy to talk about it again until I felt comfortable. And Supervisor Gore and I have had personal conversations about how we want this relationship to go forward. And it's positive and to get past the past. And personally, I'm ready to move past the past. I'm ready to put all that garbage behind us because they are our partners. They are our friends. This process, and even the outside counsel said, I've done this for many years and all I've seen from both sides is cooperation. So I have no reason to believe that that won't continue. And if we do have issues, there's mechanisms built in to be able to come back to the table and go, okay, they're holding up the process or we're holding up the process. What are we going to do about it? It's not like once we form this, then we're all stuck and there's no recourse. There's mechanisms built in to solve those problems.
I had a question too, just that maybe think of one. So when the two supervisors that have been appointed to it, obviously Supervisor Wygant is no longer going to be on the board. So does that just mean that whoever represents the district that represents Lincoln will always be?
That's the decision they made.
They'll revisit it, won't you? You can come back, yeah.
Because that would actually make me feel much more comfortable with the 2x2 voting structure, knowing that our representative who also has a stake specifically to our region in the game.
That would be my intent. And that's why it was recommended that Supervisor Wygant, because he is the supervisor representing that area, was appointed this time around. As the JPA starts, we're starting that. So then the Board of Supervisors will make appointments for that, but this should be a District 2 supervisor appointment because that supervisor is representing this area.
Is there a way for us to build that in where that is always expected, where yes, the county can get 2 seats and we have 2 seats, but only contingent that the county gets 2 seats with one being the District 2 representative? Because it really does then kind of double dip, for lack of a better term, because that is our representative, like our needs are their needs, right?
And you're absolutely right. And one of the things that we do is when we parson out the assignments, it's basically which supervisor represents that entity, right? So I'm on South Placer wastewater.
I would like it
because I
formalized
represent
if possible,
Roseville.
though. I would feel so much more comfortable if it were formalized.
You certainly could make that an amendment to the approval, and then we'll have to get back with the county. They probably have to take some sort of consent item for the county.
But
to
it sounds
consent
like
to that
that's
if they want.
what you're saying is that is your de facto method. So like just,
It is our de
just
facto
placing it
method.
as an actual formalization, would that be met with resistance, do we
I
think?
don't see why it would.
Yeah.
I think it would.
I
be
feel like
fine.
that could relieve some of our concerns, or if I'm hearing yours correctly, because it does create where 3 of the electeds who would be on that body are responsive to the people who will be owning the homes out here. That would take a lot off of like the lingering concerns I have, would take a lot off of that for me.
And Councilmember Salhai, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to,
go
there's
ahead.
one thing that you passed by that was a major discussion point, and it related to either agency acting as sort of obstructionists and using wastewater as sort of a sword to avoid some project that we don't want to see happen or they don't want to see happen. It's made very clear and was made very clear throughout the process that this is not a land use authority. They don't have land use authority. They don't have the ability to say, sorry, city, you can't annex land. Presumably they could comment just to make sure that, we're installing the correct lines and things like that. But it's laid out in the document pretty clearly that it simply provides the service. That's it. And if we decide we want there to be more service, great. And if the alternative, is specific to, and that's also why it's very clear in the language of the name that it's simply SMD1 in Lincoln and not SMD3 or SMD7 or I don't know how many SMDs you have, but
Yeah.
The JPA focused on doing one thing. First of all, the visibility or the transparency of that is very clear, unlike a city council meeting where something may or may not be on the agenda. Anyway, their job is to deliver the best product for the best money, period. I cannot think of a case where when Lincoln has 90% of the users, that I can't think of a decision that they would make that would harm the 10%. And if you're wearing the hat of a JPA board of director, might at least.
Wait, you're not to interrupt you though, but what you're doing is you're assuming that all of the goodwill that we have right here, which again, didn't happen easily, but we do work together well now, is maintained by all future electeds. And the truth of the matter is that it may be, and it may not be. You might have future people who wouldn't want to wear the proper hat during the proper authority. I see it happen over the state all the time. So I don't want to build something in that is vulnerable to that type of,
Well,
right, where,
it doesn't matter how many votes then. If you don't pick the right people,
which is what, to me, I think it would take my concern. Like, honestly, I think any hesitation that I would have on voting it would be taken away if we just always have 2 from Lincoln and the county Lincoln representative.
Well, and it sounds like that's what. they
Yeah,
try to do anyway.
to me, it just provides a little assurance in there, because if that person decides to go to the JPA and wear the wrong hat, guess who gets to vote them out of office next time? the same people impacted by the poor decision. So the ultimate decision maker, whether it's going to be council or county, is going to be the same body who's impacted by the rates, who is 90%. To me, it's representative, and then it's out of my hands and I don't have concerns.
Thank you. Councilmember Lordson, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I just want to let people know that, you know, I don't have the institutional hatred for the county that some people see.
We don't have institutional hatred.
Hate the county.
Well, anyhow, I've always, I've worked with the county and and I appreciate their expertise, and them and the grand jury and everything. I just, I know what you have your own things to do and your own job and, go ahead and do it. And I'm willing to work with you. But so anyway, that's beside the point.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You know why it took 2 years? Was it because nobody was dedicated? Which is another, if you had it, yes, right? And it took,
So let's.
I'd
try
like
to-
to-
yeah.
I'd like to
The point
jump
there.
back into
Back,
the
go
actual
ahead.
discussion.
Go ahead.
Sean,
You
you
have a good
raised
point
an
there.
interesting point. It would be within the ability of a JPA, I believe, if we came along and said, hey, we're looking at adding villages 2, 3, and 4. That's going to be an additional 10,000 homes. Will you serve them? They will have the ability to say, yeah, we can't serve them.
No, the way it's constructed is that they would say something more like, sure, we can serve them,
Here's
but
the
we're going to
bill.
need to expand.
Yeah.
And honestly, that would probably be the same response we would give to ourselves. So the other thing that I think that like kind of gets lost a little bit, and I get lost in it sometimes when I think about this, sometimes I forget that the JPA isn't some shadow organization, it's you.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes, it's us.
so so presumably we're going to have a good enough relationship with ourselves that we're going to be able to work through that issue. But honestly, it was something that I thought of quite a bit because I certainly wouldn't want to create a scenario where, things get really messy in some project that, 10, 20 years down the road that we haven't thought of yet, that we're
So
competing interests.
I will agree with you with this observation. When we serve on other committees and other boards, there are individuals who take off the one hat and put on the other hat and make decisions that are harmful to the hat they just took off. And come right back down, sit at a dais and say, what the heck happened to those idiots up there that
Well,
approved
to
this
Dan's
thing?"
point, that's part of the job, right? If you're there and you're looking at the financials and you're looking at what your duty is, that is your job. To Sean's point, it was pinpointed so specifically that your job is to provide the services to the residents that are in need of it, which means that the proper answer would be expanding and raising rates.
So you have anything else?
I'll share this just for it to be on record. Another area of concern for me is the potential, and I recognize it is only a potential. Right now, the boundaries are very well drawn, but a unanimous vote could change the boundaries to go further south and serve areas that are in direct competition for bringing in industry, bringing in business, bringing in commercial with the city of Lincoln, and that concerns me. I don't think that's going to happen, but it could. And so how we address that is uncertain to me.
I think you address it if we do write in where it has to be the District 2 representative and people are making decisions that end up actually having a harmful impact.
Sure, but the District 2 representative will have approved, I'm just going to say it this way, the District 2 representative that is being proposed will have been part of a team that approved Bickford Ranch, Placer Ranch,
Understood.
Omarosa, the expansion of the Sunset Industrial, all in direct competition.
But at
with
the end of
city
the
Lincoln.
day, we're here because our residents voted us to make decisions for them, and they're there because the exact same residents voted for them to make decisions for them.
And-
So
and-
I don't have any problem abdicating this council's control over that personally, if the actual power is still in the place of the exact individual where it should be. It doesn't bother me personally. If the community continues to be responsive to a majority vote on that entity, they have the power to ask questions and not like what they see and change it.
Just have one question. Councilman Joyner, are you suggesting that like other parts of the county could be put into the system?
Sure.
Oh, you mean like Foster Ranch or, okay, okay.
Yeah, it's a new governing body. They're gonna make.
They'll make decisions.
Yeah.
Right. So if,
Just point it.
if there's no other, yeah.
Mayor,
go
would
ahead.
you mind, I don't want to put Kevin or Ken on the spot. but
I was going to give them a chance to speak if they wanted to, yes.
There's some specifics as it relates to like SMDs and what areas they're allowed to serve. And I wonder, if one of you could just kind of speak to that because it's sort of germane.
Good evening, Ken Grimm with the Department of Public Works for the county. The agreement, how it's written today, first off, I don't think there's any problem with making something Forest District 2, or, that board just has to be okay with that. I don't see that as a problem. But I think it is important for you to know and to go to Mayor Pro Tem Joyner's question. The agreement does provide unanimous for things like district. So if that were to try to happen, both Lincoln representatives would have to say that's a good thing for Lincoln in order to do.
I understand that, but it is possible. And
It is possible.
And I'm thinking down the road. I'm thinking 10 years down the road when we have no idea who's going to be sitting at this dais and what level of knowledge and engagement they may have.
I
It's a
just want to
concern.
make sure it's clear that
Yeah.
there is power in the Lincoln City
There is.
Council and your membership to ensure those things. So,
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate that. Okay. What I'd like to do, unless you have other things you need to say, which is fine, let's do these one at a time. So the first one, Yes.
Can we ask that be written in and just amended as a, Sean? or is it needed?
So,
Anyone?
yes, so looking at paragraph 7.1 of the JPA that's before you to be adopted by resolution, it simply states the authority will be governed by a 4-member board of directors, which is hereby established, consisting of 2 directors for each member. It could be amended to add a second sentence thereafter that states 1 director from county shall be a supervisor with Lincoln within its supervisorial district.
And would that be consistent to your
would you have a
policies?
problem taking that back and getting that amended for your board? Fine, okay.
Because I don't want to cause undue
Yeah.
hiccups, but I really
Okay.
think that would solve a lot of some of the concerns.
Well, and I think, and I was on the meeting, and I think that's why they
Yeah.
nominated Wygant.
Yeah, well, that's
Supervisor
why I was
Wygant.
thinking, obviously,
Yes.
because it's, and so
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, all right. So what we're
Can we
going to
just
do.
say as,
So I'm largely fine with that, but thinking down the road, we just went through a redistricting effort that stopped, I believe, Rockland from being split in 2. Lincoln could potentially be split in 2 at a future date. And so when we're saying a representative who represents a portion of, or Lincoln, it may not be the entirety of
well,
Lincoln.
then they would have to come back
They'd have
and
to come back. I mean,
fix
there's-
it, and there would be governing bodies that could do that.
Yeah, there are many scenarios
Yeah,
that could
there are.
happen down the road that we would have to address and.
That
and
gets
we
us through
would-
10 years.
And we would do that. Yeah.
And then whoever's here in 10 years.
Right.
God bless.
Okay. So I want to do one,
They'll be here.
each one individually because on number 2, we have to nominate who's going to serve on this. So we're going to do them one at a time. So item 1, resolution 2022-256, number 1, approve the Lincoln Sewer Maintenance District 1 wastewater authority joint powers agreement and authorize the city manager to execute the agreement subject to the city attorney and risk management concurrence. So I will accept the motion.
As amended.
As amended. Yes, as amended. Do I have a motion?
I move.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Carl Skint,
Yeah.
Councilmember Silhouette,
Pause.
Yes.
Councilmember Lauritsen,
Although I'm not totally convinced, we seem to have gone a long way with this thing, and I know Councilmember Carlskin wants to serve on another board, so yeah, I'll vote yes.
Councilmember Joyner,
Yes.
and Mayor Andriata.
Yes. All right.
And
item
and
number-
just as long as we're on that item, if we can skip to item 3, which is a motion to authorize the city manager or designee to execute any documents necessary to effectuate the JPA
We want
agreement.
us to go to 3 and then go back to 2?
Yeah, I think they're kind of paired.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Yes, thank you. Councilmember Joyner,
Yes.
Councilmember Silhouette.
Yes.
Councilmember Carl Skint,
Yes.
Councilmember Lauritsen,
Yes.
and Mayor Andriata.
Yes. All right. And item number 2, appoint 2 council members and 1 alternate to serve as members of the Lincoln Sewer Maintenance District 1 Wastewater Authority Board of Directors. So It makes sense to me, and I'm open to discussion unless Councilman Carlskin has a different idea. That I nominate him and myself because we are the ones who've been sitting on there, and personally, I'm kind of invested. But if anybody else has other suggestions, I'm open to that, but that would be my suggestion.
So apparently I'm the one with some of the largest concerns here. I think it's important to have somebody with those concerns be in on the formation of this. So I'm going to offer myself as well.
Okay,
What is,
Wait, you have the most concerns?
Bill overcame a lot because he didn't want it. What is the term?
I don't
Like,
know.
what is that? What does that?
the-
What does that look like? That's
what's the
one
term
thing,
of
that's
it?
one question I think we didn't
I know
ask.
yeah,
Yeah.
Okay,
it would be.
So it's indefinite?
Our normal rotation,
Our normal term,
so it would just be wouldn't,
whatever
like
we normally do.
SACOG for the last 7 years.
interesting,
Or-
interesting that we never discussed that part of it.
There's nothing in the
What's in there? It would
JPA.
just, if we go. as-
Well, our normal one, the mayor gets to just decide every year, kind of like, no, yeah, no,
Yeah,
yeah.
but the
Whereas
mayor
I
doesn't really get to decide. The mayor gets to make a nomination. And
That's
then the
true.
council ratifies it.
very little resistance usually, but I feel like it should probably be more than 1 year on the JPA. Feels like.
There usually is.
That's what I'm saying. It shouldn't rotate very frequently in my mind.
Not in the JPA,
I agree.
because you can't control your agency. It just says that the.
No,
city
I'm saying
council-
in terms of like the council's nominating who serves on it, you
Right.
control that. It should not be able to like go back and forth very often. Sorry. I am fine with it as proposed, just because of the in-depth discussions and because of the concerns that we both actually raised about there being contention or any leverage. Seems like a lot of goodwill has been procured among
So what are you okay with?
existing with,
Because-
as you proposed it.
Me and
I am okay with that personally, just because I feel like there's a lot of goodwill and good relationship there to move forward, and that momentum would be a
Pam, what are
good
your-
thing.
What are your thoughts? Do you want to stay or you want to give
No,
it to?
no, Yes.
Yes, okay. And I would like to also, but do you have thoughts on that? No?
I think Dan has the most invested in this thing, so, so far.
Well, that's
And I know he wants
Uh,
to be on the coach, I mean, the JPA, not the coaches.
And I will say, Paul, I do feel like when Holly came in, all of the concerns that had been voiced, she went in with a microphone. It's Bonnie's like, yes, she did.
Bonnie can say, "Yes, I did."
So I think if there's continued concerns, that they will be happy to continue to voice them for us, hopefully.
But one more thing, this is a Brown Act body, so anybody on the city council and anybody else can attend every single meeting.
Exactly. All right, so we're going to go with nominating Councilmember Carlskin and myself. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Need a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Yes. Councilmember Selhai.
Yes.
Councilmember Carlskin.
Yes.
Councilmember Joyner
Yes.
and Councilmember Lauritsen
Yes.
and Mayor Andriana.
Yes. Right.
We need an
What?
alternate.
Oh, yes, that's right. You want to be the
Paul.
alternate? Okay, all right. So Councilmember or Mayor Pro Tem Joyner is alternate. and
Can we just add that into the motion that we just approved?
We have to go back and.
Or do we
roll
have to
call?
go back and do it again?
Sorry, are you okay
Are
with
you
that?
good with Paul being the alternate? So we're good?
How do you mark that down?
Yeah.
He nodded first.
He nodded. Good, all right.
Yeah,
Is that better?
there's a significant head nod.
All right, congratulations, everybody. Thank you all so much for being here. We really appreciate
Thank
your
you.
patience. Thank you. All right. Okay, we are moving on to item number 7, public comment on non-agenda items. I have one card from Darla Gutierrez.
Thanks for sticking with us through all
Yeah,
that.
thank you so much.
As 4 of you know, I was here last week about some stop signs that we have on the corner of 3rd and L. And there was some complaints also about First Street. So I'm speaking for Third and L. First Street, there's a school there. Third and L, there's a school there. We have stop signs there, but a lot of the times, especially during the summer, coming from McDonald's going down to Creekside, that area, they pass it. A lot of them realize, oh, there was a stop sign. Half the time they're on the phone, half the time they're not paying attention. Last year, my grandson was in 8th grade, and I literally had to go a lot of the times to the corner because I understand that the school sends the teacher out to do their little sign thing. But a lot of the times, students are already walking through there before even the teacher getting there because he's dismissing his class. He spends, or they spend their 5-10 minutes there, they leave, but there's still students going. Another problem from what I spoke about last week or 2 weeks ago was there's a sign that a gentleman puts on every corner, and they've added even more of these. And it says, school state law, stop when, stop for, and then it has a little person for a crosswalk, even though there's a stop sign. But I've seen it, like I said, I live on the corner of 3rd and L, and I've seen it where they just go through because there's no kid going by or adult or whatever. And this is during the day. 3 years ago, I came and I went downstairs and I asked about a spec for your signs. They told me to go to this, the engineering part, whatever. And I spoke to a person and I asked about the stop sign on the floor. I've asked about the stop sign, how it closed. And as I've lived here all my life, and I don't know how you guys do it. I'm not familiar with it. I don't know all the laws and all the whatever, but the person can give me a spec for it. A lot of the times you see a sign here, and you see a sign over there, and you see a sign over there. It's not consistent. That's, I feel, one of the problems. A couple weeks ago, I suggested, I don't want the bumps either. You corrected the bump on First Street 3 years ago when I came for another problem that I wanted to discuss, and I discussed it with you. You said they were going to fix First Street, the road. It took 3 years. So I figured by the time you get to Third Street, it's gonna take another 3 years. I don't feel that our area needs to wait 3 years for a proper stop sign or a stop sign on J Street. Traffic coming from McDonald's going all the way down to 3rd and L, zooming all the way down. If you put a stop sign on J Street, it will alleviate some of that pressure of cars going by. I understand I went over my 3 minutes. I'm sorry.
Okay. No, that's great. Thank you. So I'm going to let either Sean or Chief respond to your comment. I do want to say, as far as the crossing guard when school gets out, have you spoke to the school district about that? Because that's something that you should raise with them because they do need to have somebody out there. Yes, that's something that they can do,
Yeah.
not we can. do.
I sent an email to the superintendent about the wording on their signs,
Okay.
that they need to take out the person. It needs to be stop.
Yeah.
Nothing else, stop. Even though there's common sense, I believe we all have common sense that there's a stop sign
Yeah.
and then there's a stop.
Yeah.
And even though it says that when a person's going by, you're supposed to stop, you should be able to see both things.
Right.
But a lot of the people going through there are on their phone,
Right.
looking this way or looking that way. So
Okay.
that thing of on the middle of the road is not helping.
Okay. Chief, I know we've been monitoring that area.
You know, Mayor, I think there's a lot of detailed questions that she had in there, and I think I would be kind of doing a disservice to sort of give her a real quick answer. So it would be better maybe if I could get your phone number and maybe get 15 minutes with you.
Okay, it's in the paper.
Okay, fantastic.
Okay.
I'll give you a call tomorrow.
Okay.
And thank you for your time and coming. We,
All right.
we do care about it and we know it's a problem.
I don't believe the area is requesting, a sign that says, don't make any noise when you go by, or don't be braking at 6 o'clock in the morning. We're asking for a proper stop sign with lights.
Yes.
Because like I said, right now, it's dark because we still live in the old area. You guys haven't gone to giving us any lights, like,
Okay, well,
With
you'll
the
have to
new
fill out
area.
another card for the lights. No, I'm
Yeah.
just kidding. I'm just
But-
kidding. I'm just
but,
kidding.
we live in the old area where all the
Yes.
lights are on one side or all the lights are on one side here. There's not half and half or whatever.
I understand.
So if we have a stop sign with the little blinking, it would help a lot.
Okay. Mr. Scully will get a hold of you this
Okay.
week. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much. All right, any other comments? Mr. Chapman?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Byron Chapman, council members. Just to piggyback on what the last speaker said too. I do know, and not in depth, but every once in a while in our neighborhoods, we also see a lot of the volunteers, the seniors who help out with the police department. And sometimes just seeing the car that says police on it, regardless of what their activities do. I'm wondering if a little bit of time of actual visual stimulus there might grab people's attention without having to pull away the officers who need to get into. I'm not saying that this is not a dangerous scenario. It certainly could be, but it's just a thought that I came up with. The only item I had here, and I shouldn't say only, every year I bring this up because oftentimes I think we take some things too much for granted. And I really do appreciate the fact that the city of Lincoln still has invocations. There's other cities and other country throughout the country. They have their issues about it. I'm just happy that it still happens. I think a kind word never hurts. And for that, I appreciate it. And I thank the city for still doing that.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman. All right, any other comments on non-agenda items? Anybody on Zoom?
Yes, Mayor. Melanie, please go ahead.
Good evening, Holly and council members. Melanie from 12 Bridges area. I wanted to just bring up again the matter of the September 16th meeting and Bill Lyons and Dan Cross's absolutely unexcusable actions during that meeting. I understand that one or both of them may have reached out with apologies. They may feel sorry about how they acted. I think those blatantly show that they know what they did during that meeting violated their bylaws, potentially violated the Brown Act. Those two gentlemen have served this city as representatives long enough to know better than what they did. And I know you have some information before you. I know there's been an appeal filed. It's my understanding that the chair, Bill Lyons, has verbally said he wished he would have tabled the decision there. And now there are kids in our city whose safety and daily lifestyle is going to change drastically because of the decision that those two gentlemen in part made as part of the Planning Commission decision to develop the Deer Crossing plans that were made during that meeting. So I just want to get on record again that there have been formal complaints filed against Bill Lyons and Dan Cross. And I would love to hear some response from the city council regarding what has been filed against those two gentlemen.
Hey, thank you, Melanie. Anybody else? Okay, all right. So we're
Thank
gonna
you.
move- Oh, thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on to item 8, the consent agenda. Councilmember Joyner has asked to pull 8J to recuse himself. So we will do that. And then before we take a motion to approve the rest of the consent agenda, is there anybody else who wants to pull anything? Okay, I just want to point out, we don't have to pull it or read it. I just want to point out to the public that item 8A, or excuse me, item 8B is a proclamation designating November 26, 2022 as Small Business Saturday. So the day after Thanksgiving or that weekend. So please shop local. And then 8C is designating November as Global Entrepreneurship Month. And so if you are so inclined, please take time to read those, or they're great proclamations. Okay, so if there's no other comments or questions about or pulling any of the others, I will take a motion to approve the consent except for 8J.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Yes. Councilmember Silhai?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Public.
Mr. Chapman, did you want to, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand. Did you want to pull one? 8I. I apologize, I didn't see your hand. Okay. All right, so let's back up a little bit. Other than 8I and 8J, so we have a,
So moved with those two.
Thank you.
Second.
Councilmember Silhai?
Yes.
Councilmember Lauritsen?
Yes.
Councilmember Joyner?
Yes.
Councilmember Carl Skent?
Yes.
And Mayor Andriata.
yes, okay. All right, item 8I, Resolution 2022-250, authorizing a budget augmentation of $21,514 from the available unencumbered Fund 100 General Fund to CIP 605 McBean Park Stadium Bleacher Replacement Project, and authorize the city manager to execute a contract for construction with PBM Construction, Inc. for $128,649, and authorize the city engineer to approve change orders not to exceed $12,864. Mr. Chapman, what was your question?
A comment based on the particular order, and in order for me to do that, there's a council meeting that took place prior to all of this, and I wanted to play that before I can actually say exactly how I'm going to get where I need to get to. So I should be there very quickly.
Is for phase 1 of the McBean Stadium, which was specifically designed for the playing field. Phase 2, which is for the stadium and for the bathrooms, and the ways. So for the events that will take place at the new field, we intend to have 80 playing bathrooms there, so that everyone's. I might also mention that for the majority was funded by not the city, but outside sources who made major contributions. William Jessup contributed $250,000. Placer Valley Tourism, over $250,000. Jessup then came back with $97,000, and we would have nothing going on there without them, because we didn't have the funds, still don't have the funds to do the first phase, but now that we had made the commitment, we attracted in William Jessup, and we attracted in, a Woodback League and the Placer Valley Tourism, told me personally that they will give us significantly more money. So as we start to make the actual, I would say that 99% of our investment was in making a proper infield and a proper outfield so that they can play a proper baseball game. Without that, we didn't have to worry about anything else. Now that we've done that, and now that we're going to use it, now we will fix the stands, the restrooms, anything else that needs attention.
Okay, you got 1 minute now, Mr. Chapman.
Exactly. That meeting took place on January 24th, 2017. This January, it will be 7 years. When I looked at this on the consensus, I went, wow, gee, it's about the stadium. That center section, if you're in a wheelchair or walker, you can't get there from here, right? That's been 7 years, and that's why I wanted you to hear that. This is not something that's just been hanging around. There has been sunscreen over it, the safety net, announcer's booth, lighting for the field, new dugouts. All of these items do not touch on a person's civil rights. If you did not do any of these functions, it would not have affected a person's civil rights. Because I or anyone else in a wheelchair cannot get to that center section, that is a discrimination. And it's been brought up, and it's been 7 years. And to spend $128,000, I was thinking that this was going to be part of that fix. It has nothing to do with what's taking place there, anything to do with the ADA.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman. Any other comments or questions on this item? Okay, take a motion to approve item 8I.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, roll call.
Thank you. Councilmember Silhai,
Yes.
Councilmember Joyner,
Yes.
Councilmember Carl Skent,
Yes.
Councilmember Lauritsen,
Yes.
and Mayor Andriata.
Yes.
Hey, Jay, well, I'm going to recuse myself from that item. The project is directly adjacent to property owned by my family, and I think it's appropriate that I do so.
Okay. Give you a minute to step out.
And Mayor, one minor clarification that was pointed out to me in the meeting. In the actual report and documents, the references to Joyner Parkway are correct. In the agenda, there's a reference to East Joyner Parkway. It's just Joyner Parkway.
Are you talking about for this item, AJ?
AJ,
Okay.
yeah. So we'll make that. It's a non-substantive. We'll make that fix.
So noted. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments for this one? Okay, if not, then I take motion to approve item 8J.
I move.
Okay, roll call, please.
Thank you. Councilmember Carl Skent,
Yes.
Councilmember Lauritsen,
Yes.
Councilmember Silhai,
Yes.
and Mayor Andriata.
Yes. All right, I'm gonna go grab Mayor Pro Tem Joyner, please. Okay. Item 9, public hearing. 9A, conduct a public hearing and waive full reading and introduce ordinance 1056B by title and number only, adopting 2022 California Green Code Administrative Building, Fire, Plumbing, Mechanical, Electrical, Energy, Residential, Existing Building Code, and related construction codes, Lincoln Municipal Code Title 15, Building and Construction, as applicable to all construction within the city of Lincoln, with a local amendment adding section 15.04.030 of the Lincoln Municipal Code, adopting the 2021 International Swimming Pool and Spa Code. So our chief building official, Will Foote, will give the staff report. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and council members. Yes, so as you are mostly well aware that every 3 years, the international codes as well as the state building codes are amended in order to reflect the most up-to-date laws and provisions in order to give our citizens the best safe built environment we can provide. So again, by statute, all jurisdictions in California revert to the unamended 2023 California building codes. So with the Building Standards Commission actually allows us to provide amendments given our certain circumstances to adopt by reference, which allows us on unique circumstances to adopt certain other provisions in code so that, excuse me, as long as they're more restrictive than the state minimums, we're allowed to do this. The resolution is adopted this evening. The new ordinance, along with our local amendments, will be submitted to the California Building Standards Commission and then is enforceable within the city of Lincoln. Aside from the state code, staff is seeking the adoption again of the 2021 International Swimming Pool and Spa Code. That's actually, we're not doing anything else. So if you have any questions.
Yeah.
Oh, they put that up? Oh, I was gonna have that up in case you had any questions about that. Oh,
Okay, so
my apologies.
no, it's okay. Sorry. That's a great picture. Okay, so I was just a little confused on the staff report because I understand updating the codes. I wasn't clear on what we were updating for the pools and spa. What's the actual change?
So the actual change for our municipal code would be the adoption of the 2021 International Swimming Pool and Spa Code.
Okay.
So which,
Okay.
Yes, that's it.
So
But
what does that mean?
What does that
Oh,
mean?
of
Yeah,
course,
yeah.
absolutely. So no, so what that means is, are you asking about?
So what is the state minimum and what does the international code do above that?
So the state minimum defaults to California Health and Safety Code, which is about 2 pages in the back of our California code book that has nothing to do with design. It has to do more with commercial and public use pools. So the reason to adopt the 2021 International Pool and Spa Code is one of the biggest ones that we have lately is what they call on-ground or above-ground pools, as you see here. Historically, there's not been a lot to codify those. So there's not much language in our municipal code or in the building codes. So with these, what the international code does, it has an entire section on how to regulate these and makes it a lot easier for homeowners. We get a lot of neighbor complaints for someone having an above ground pool. And it's hard for us to justify charging someone $1,500 or $1,600 for a permit for a $300 Walmart pool.
So it's making it better for residents.
Absolutely, makes it
Okay.
a lot easier for us without
All you
having
gotta
to
tell
get an
me.
engineer.
Yeah,
That's good. In reading this, I thought maybe we were gonna try to get the Olympics to come to Lincoln, which is why we're in international
My
swimming
apologies,
pool.
thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments?
Mayor, I just want to point one thing out about Will. He probably wouldn't mention. Will is one of 2 delegates that represented California at the International Building Code thing,
Yeah.
the conference, where they literally vote on updated codes for the entire world. So he was representing, it was just you and one other person for all of California, correct?
No, actually, LA Basin had a large, but there was
Yeah.
2 of us from above San Diego, basically.
Yeah, we really appreciate you and we're fortunate to have you with us.
Thank you for that.
Okay, any public comment on this item?
It is
Oh,
a hearing.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Public hearing. Any comment? Anybody on Zoom?
No one on Zoom, Mayor.
Okay, close public hearing. I'll entertain a motion to approve this item.
Motion to approve.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Joyner,
Yes.
Councilmember Carlskent,
Yep.
Councilmember Lauritsen,
Yes.
Councilmember Silhai,
Yes.
and Mayor Andriana.
Thank you, Will. Appreciate it. Okay, item 10. General business 10A, adopt resolution 2022-255, authorizing the issuance of the City of Lincoln Community Facilities District Number 2019-1, Independence at Lincoln Special Tax Bond Series 2022, and a principal amount not to exceed $15 million, and approving certain documents and taking certain other actions in connection therewith. So our finance director, Anita Racker, will give the staff report. Thank you, ma'am.
Meeting. And I am actually going to just take a moment to introduce our bond and underwriting counsel, Brian Forbath, who's going to be providing a brief presentation and answering any questions that we have regarding these bond issuance.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Andrada, council members. Brian Forbath from Strathern Yucca. Pleasure. It's my first, I've been your bond counsel for about 4 years now. This is the first time I've actually been able to be here in person with you all. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening. So you have here before you this evening a proposal to issue some bonds on behalf of the Independence at Lincoln project. And I think you probably are all sort of familiar with the project. It's located just south of Nichols Road, right at the intersection of Waverly Drive, right by the West Placer USD bus garage there. And the little map shows sort of the location of that. Independence is a 194-acre master plan residential community. It's planned for 591 single-family, low and medium density homes in 6 different villages. Lewis Land Developers is the master developer of the project, and Phil Rodriguez from the master developer is here this evening. Any questions for him? Lewis sold all of its lots to 3 different merchant builders. Richmond American, Tri Point Homes, and D.R. Horton are all actively out there building homes today. As of September 16th, which was the date of the appraisal for the property for our bond sale, there were 147 homes that have been sold and closed to individual homeowners, another 149 homes that were under construction, and then 295 finished lots. Most of those were owned by Tri Pointe, which is sort of the last phases of the development. So a little history about the CFD. The CFD was formed back in 2009-19 at the request of Lewis Homes. The city and Lewis at that time authorized the issuance of bonds in an amount not to exceed $30 million. The expectation is that this is the first of 2 series of bonds that'll be issued. The resolution authorizes the issuance of bonds in an amount not to exceed 15 million. However, I think it's going to be closer to about 13 million, the ultimate size of the bonds. And the bonds are being sized off of the special taxes from property that has a building permit issued as of September 16, 2022. So just to put that in perspective, this is not sort of a speculative, like raw land sort of deal. We're basing this really based off of vertical construction at this time. The second series of bonds is to be expected, in a year or two, once essentially all of the building permits are substantially issued at that time. The resolution before you this evening approves a bond indenture, which is the contract the city enters into with the bond owners, a bond purchase agreement, which is entered into with the bond underwriter, Piper Sandler, an acquisition and construction of funding agreement, which is the agreement pursuant to which the CFD agrees to acquire the completed facilities from the developer, a continuing disclosure agreement, and then most importantly, the preliminary offering document for the bonds, which sort of summarizes the security as the prospectus for the bonds that are sold to investors. The city's financing team consists of myself, Stradley Carlson Ralph, PFM Financial Advisors is the city's municipal advisor, NBS is special tax consultant, Integra Realty Resources was the appraiser, U.S. Banks the trustee, and then Piper Sandler is the underwriter for the transaction, and Ralph Holmes from Piper Sandler is in the audience this evening. If anybody has any questions about the marketing or sale of the bonds, he's more than happy to answer those questions. And then the schedule was changed a little bit, assuming approval this evening. We're expected to go into the market and price the bonds the week of November 28th, so it's off just a little bit. And then the bonds would close just before the holidays, right around December 20th. And with that, I am more than happy to answer any questions that anyone may have on the subject. And those, I'm sure Phil and Ralph would be too.
Thank you very much. All right, any questions, comments from the council? No?
Very straightforward.
Yeah, no, I don't either. Any public comment?
I don't have anybody on Zoom, Mayor.
Okay, anybody in the council chambers? No? Okay, thank you very much for that. Very straightforward. We have no issues. And if everyone's ready, I'll take a motion to approve this item.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call,
Councilman-
please.
Yes, Councilmember Joyner,
Yes.
Councilmember Carl Skint,
Yes.
Councilmember Lauritsen.
Yes.
Councilmember Silhai.
Yes.
And Mayor Andriata.
Yes, all right, congratulations. Thanks for hanging with us. I know it's kind of a long meeting. Okay, item 10C, workshopping the 2-year mayoral rotation. Our city manager, Sean Scully, will begin the discussion.
Actually, our city clerk
Oh, great,
is going to give this presentation.
wonderful.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. If you can start the PowerPoint, guys. Did somebody walk away with our controller? Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
So as a brief background, the transition from at-large elections to district elections requires some modifications to our current municipal code language. The current language includes incumbent with 2 years of service. A newly elected council member would be placed at the bottom of rotation. If there are more than 2 newly elected, the order would be by number of votes, still placed below incumbents. Previous mayor would go before newly elected, but below other incumbents. And if there were to be 4 to 5 newly elected, those with shorter terms would be at the top of the rotation than those with the longer terms. Multiple appointments would be determined by a coin toss. So in previous city council meetings, we have had discussions about a 2-year mayoral rotation. Some of the considerations that were raised were city council would still need to approve the selections and appointments. It could be based on elections results with a weighted percentage of the district. There would need to be a built-in hook, or a supermajority 4-1 could oust the mayor or vice mayor. A 2-year term would be the limit for mayor and vice mayor. The member would need to be in good standing in order to be appointed as mayor or vice mayor. And an initial selection would be random to start the cycle. So along with the mayoral rotation, there was some discussion on appointments and having some language with some options being brought back to city council. So in our research, the majority of cities that have district elections either have a 4 council member and a separately elected at-large mayor, or they nominate or select the mayor annually. So those are the two. The first one is current. We would just modify our current language with a percentage, a weighted percentage for the district votes. We could also go to just selecting or nominating the mayor. We could do it by district. So we would go in order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or whatever the council determined. We could do just a random selection. Some of the cons for those two would be that there could be council members that would serve as they came in. They would not have any of that 2-year experience. We could do the highest vote percentage. That could preclude others from serving depending on how the rotation was selected. Or we could do longest service, and again, that would give us experience, but it may prevent others from serving. So unless council has any questions for staff, we're going to kind of open this up for you to have the discussion and make the decisions.
Great. Thank you, Gwen. I really appreciate that. So normally I would open it up for discussion first, but I'm gonna make some comments and some thoughts I have on this. And so if you'll just bear with me for a second. So first of all, I want to say that we all recognize that nobody is entitled to the mayor position. It's an honor and a privilege to serve in that capacity. Second, now that we're all elected by districts, we all understand that we have to create a new system of rotation. And I appreciate staff taking our conversations previously and giving us options and things that we could or could not do. But what was before no longer is valid. We cannot move forward with the old rotation system. And I really believe that calculating number of votes, rotating districts and all that, it's going to be too complicated, and I don't think it'll work. The council has discussed this item twice now, and there's several different ideas of how this could go. We kind of left it alone because, we had a lot of ideas. I have some thoughts on this that wrap around not just what the new policy should be, but the climate of where we are now as a city. I believe the simplest and most common sense way to choose the mayor is for the council to choose the mayor and the mayor pro tem at each rotation, as Gwen has suggested in one of her options. I think it's very reasonable to have an informal agreement that the mayor pro tem will move into the mayor position after that term is up, unless that person gives the council a reason not to go that way. But the council always has the last say, and the majority of the council will decide who sits in those seats each time. There's been some concern that if we do this, if we go this way and the council appoints a mayor at each rotation, it could get political. And of course, that could happen. Anything could happen. However, we have created a culture here that is cooperative and professional. And it's our job to continue that by modeling this for new council members who come onto the council at any given time. I believe that we should change from a 1-year rotation to a 2-year, and because it's important to have stability and continuity. And I think 1 year is just not enough time. We've done that forever. Other cities still do that. I think the 2-year works well for Roseville. And I think that Lincoln is in the place now where a 2-year rotation makes sense. And we would start with, right now, the 2020 election cycle and then switch in 2024. The mayor, I believe, should be chosen on these following criteria. Whatever the makeup of the council is at that time, who is qualified to hold the seat at that time, meaning who has the experience. We've all agreed that new members should not be mayor, and who wants to do it, and who can embrace the job the way it needs to be. Over the last several years, we have worked very hard to rebuild trust with our residents, our city, and the mayor plays a big role in that. Right now, it's my firm belief that what our city needs is stability and continuity. And with everything we have been through, our residents, our businesses, our developers, and most importantly, our staff need stability. And some may say that the mayor rotation should not be an issue for our staff, that it doesn't make a difference. But at this point in time, it actually does matter. It matters a great deal. I've spoken to many staff members throughout this year who are happy to be working for Lincoln now, but still remember past issues, and there's still some lingering doubts about security, emotional, personal, because of past issues. Fortunately, we have Sean, and he's done a lot of work to make our staff feel comfortable, but we still have some work to do on that. I spent a lot of time investing in staff and building trust with them. And based on the criteria that I just said, who is qualified to serve as mayor at that point in time, who wants to do it, and who can embrace the job the way it needs to be. Right now, the options on this makeup for mayor are myself, Mayor Pro Tem Joyner, and Councilmember Carlskin is qualified for sure, but has signaled that he's not interested in the additional responsibilities. And if I'm speaking out of turn, please say so, because I don't mean to discount what you want to do or what you don't want to do. The reason, as I stated, is that there must be time spent gaining experience and possibly serving as mayor pro tem before becoming mayor. And so I know we're going to have a robust discussion here, and I fully and expect that. But what I want to propose and what I'm asking the council to support is to transition to a 2-year rotation. And even if you want to still do a 1 year, but I think the 2-year makes sense. And to keep me in the seat as mayor. Now, I know that's a bold statement, but I feel like it's in the best interest of the city. This is a new time for Lincoln, and we need to keep moving forward, not backwards. So thanks for the time, and the floor is open for discussion. You would? Yeah.
You want me to start?
Just waiting for anybody to jump in there.
So for me, my feelings are literally exactly the same that where we left it last time we workshopped this, which actually that workshop changed my feelings on it from the prior one, but I have not moved on from that. I do feel like it is, actually, I think it was Mr. Chapman who really made me think, okay, because we've been talking about this 2-year mayoral thing literally since Dan was mayor. So to us, it feels like, all right, let's just like get on with it. But in those 3 years times, we went to districts. And then now we have our first election, because right now Holly and I are at large, even though our website says that we represent districts, we don't. Holly and I represent the entire city. And this is the first election, actually literally today, where it is going to be foregone conclusion, because nobody else ran. Going to be Mr. Brown over there as council member as of like midnight tonight, and Mayor Andreatta. So first time that the whole city has been represented by a specific representative for a district, and we actually have no idea what that does to the council dynamic. We haven't done that yet. We don't know what that does to representation and voices and all of that. And so I actually do feel like it's appropriate to kind of put a cog in that 2-year mayoral rotation, which I think that Dan and I brought up initially together 3 years ago. I don't think it's appropriate to move yet. I think we sit and we wait. I also feel like it's not appropriate for me to have that vote. I'm gone this is my last full council meeting. And I do feel like if all of a sudden, I can argue it both ways, right? I've been on here for 4 years. I've seen how it works. I've helped establish the collegial relationship that we really do have, and the tone. We've all worked together to do that. And so in terms of council relations and dynamics and staff, I feel like it is my mantle or whatever it is, responsibility to weigh in. But in terms of representing a district, I haven't done that and I'm not going to do that. And I don't know what that looks like. And I feel like it's a little inappropriate for me to say, hey, this is the way the city should go. I feel like I'm not the right voice for that discussion. So I'm a little uncomfortable on the 2-year part because I don't know how that's going to look. And like, you know, I'm nerdy. I like the data. I like to see what it looks like. I don't like to make like foregone conclusions and jump to, you know, what I think it's going to look like. And then all of a sudden you find out it didn't look anything like that. So putting the 2-year one aside, we are out of compliance with our code. We now have all districts starting, you know, the new mayor. So my question is under our current code, which is very complicated, and I don't know who wrote, I think that there's a bunch of different scenarios that have to go in and then like to figure out who's supposed to rotate in and rotate out. And I don't like how like complex it is. I think that it's kind of nuts. So not sad that that has to go away, but under that, do we have the ability to just agree who's going to be mayor? Because it does say that, like, you know, all of these things have to be in order, but you can say no. So does that mean that we
Ultimately,
can also say
the
just like,
council has discretion for the ultimate appointment.
so my proposal, which I'm sure there's going to be a lot of discussion after this too, but my proposal would be, I do think that I like that we have always recognized that there's mayor and the mayor pro tem and the pro tem moves into the slot. A lot of councils don't do that. I think it's weird. I think that it's nice to have that continuity. And whenever the mayor's not around or not available, or there's multiple events, everyone knows who's going to be, you know, wearing that hat. So what I would like to see happen is I would like for all of us just to continue how it's always been. We all put Paul in as the mayor pro tem at the beginning of last year, move him into the mayor slot. And I don't like the language. I don't want to vote on the language. I don't like the way that it's written. I've had the exact same comment for 3 years every time this item has been proposed. I don't like what's in there. I don't want to vote for what's in there. I would really appeal to whenever, if we don't end up voting tonight, please get it tight and right and like methodic and make sure that it's going to work long term. I don't think what's in there I don't think it does. I would like to propose that we just decide we're going to continue what we've done. Code aside, well, not code aside, but we have the authority to decide we're going to put the pro tem into the mayor. And then you guys spend the next year workshopping it, getting it right, looking at what that dynamic is looking like. What does this district thing do in making a determination so that it can maybe start? I mean, I think it's premature now. It might not be in a year. It still might be. I won't be here to know, but you guys will know. But I think that there needs to be that like time of investigation. And I also think that just voting on it and deciding it tonight, none of us have come on to consensus in any of the times that we've done it. It just feels kind of crazy to cram it in, you know, on election night.
I don't feel like we've been cramming it in. I think we've been talking about this for quite a long
No,
time.
agree with that, but like
And-
nothing's changed on the
well,
language side.
But we are
Same.
creating new language. And my proposal, my whole point of that is that we need to get away from the confusing language
I agree with you
and
on
make
that.
it very simple.
I agree with you on
And
that.
again, I'm going to go back to, I understand your point about doing what we've always done, but we can't do what we've always done anymore. We're starting a whole new thing.
Right,
Because
but
now
we
we're
can't
all.
just decide just to honor the pro tem structure, which we all agree is reasonable. and
Sure,
then
that's
just-
very
just
reas-
do
that's
it,
very
and
reasonable.
then take it to staff, investigate, get language that. Trying to think of professional terms here, because like in my mind, I just want to say doesn't suck. I don't like the language.
Well, I
Get
think,
language that is very like clear and easy, non-obfuscated, and also, you know, everyone can agree on that is in writing before us. What we do a lot of times up here is like, I have no problems with a lot of what you said, but it's not in front of me. It's not already been vetted by staff. It's not to a level where I can be like, yeah, let's vote on that. I feel like it needs to be at a level where it's official, right? And then vote on it.
I disagree with you, but that's
Yeah.
fair. Like, I respect
Just
your,
you know,
I
like,
do, but I disagree.
Because I think you have
we
good
can.
suggestions in there.
I think
but I'd
we
like to
can-
see it.
we can make it simpler. But thank you. I appreciate that.
It actually is simple. This is the rotation. You're looking at it. It's been done that way for a
I
very long
understand that,
time.
but we're all districts now.
Yeah,
Sorry.
we do.
It doesn't change anything. When Ben comes on board, he sits in that seat.
Well, no, though it
Let
does,
her-
Paul. It does change. It does change it. 'Cause-
Chart up.
well, the reason that it changes is because if you look through the code, it says that it's based on the most vote. Well, our
There's
district,
some refinement that will have to happen to it.
it doesn't work.
It doesn't work with
It
districts.
really doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
It's going to have to change.
So the number thing does not work. The rest of it works fairly well. By the way, we haven't followed that
I don't like
in a
it
very
either,
long time.
which is the same
If-
comment
if
I've
we
been
followed
saying
it
for
at
3
all.
years. I don't like it.
This has been the rotation.
But we need to
Well,
change it.
If you,
Why?
if you
Doesn't
back
work.
off,
Because
back off and read the underlying principles of the screwed up whatever we have.
Way obfuscated language. It's weird.
It's weighted towards experience. And the rotation is based on experience or time in office. And that's it, really. The only thing it affects is when you first come in, if there are 2 new people or 3, then it uses, today it uses votes. It would have to use percentages in the future. It doesn't matter
Percentage of the work.
because this election, there were no votes.
It'd be a coin toss for our current language.
And I'm not sure, given the fact that there were no votes in the last election,
Should have been a coin
even
toss.
though there were votes,
Right.
it could have been exactly the same way, except for having Richard on the ballot, which forced a ballot.
No, to your point, if Holly hadn't been rotated into mayor, we would have been out of compliance 2 years ago, but no one from that last election is in that seat, which is why we're in a pickle now. It has not worked for us since the last election, because the last election was all districts. You and Bill and Paul came in all representing a district, which means that our current language
We've
wouldn't
represent-
have applied to it if you were being in this seat, but you're not.
Right.
And we all unanimously put Paul in, even though it wasn't like necessarily compliant, we
But-
agreed to.
Okay, but my point is, in representing a district, I read the line on top as not changing anything, with the exception of the word, because the first criteria, the way we do it today, is incumbency. And if you get reelected and you're an incumbent, it's incumbency and the length of incumbency. So districts are not districts, votes or not votes. It was rotation maintained, Paul, me, and Bill.
But here's why that, in my mind, why that doesn't work anymore is because before, everyone, incumbent, newbie, whatever you want to call them, everyone represented the full city, which yes, we're by district and we represent the city, but it's going to change that direct representation because you're not elected by the full city. You're elected by just your district,
So I
right?
can
Hold
tell
on,
you
let
that-
me finish real quick. So to
But we're never
me,
gonna have elections.
to me, if I am a resident, I want to know that my representative is going to have a proportional and equal opportunity to lead the city. And if it is always based on incumbency, you could be in a position where it might be that District 5, District 3, whatever it is, maybe it because of the population base or who runs or however those like inter-district dynamics work, it might be that there are some districts where it's quite easy for an incumbent to get reelected all the time. And there's some districts where there's a lot of turnover. And then now that district is never going to have this seat. And I think that that is not equitable. I would not want language that is built in based exclusively on incumbency, because I think that it would disproportionately impact looking at our districts. I think it would impact some of our districts who already don't have a large voice. And I would hate to see that happen. I would like to see a rotation that is equitable.
Well, even so,
looking
you're
at
never
it.
going to have everybody serve in one term because we have 5 districts.
No, I mean,
Yes.
over,
Yeah.
right, where the turnover is, I
So-
think it should either be, we go political and it is voted by the majority of the body, because that is the voters, voice, really. You're leveraging your vote for the best interest of the city. Or I think it should be by district, but it should start the rotation at that second year that you're, or so that the third year that you're on is a mayor, which means that whoever comes in new will never have the opportunity to be mayor, because it will never be that district's turn in the seat.
It actually doesn't work that way.
It should be
But
able
it doesn't.
to.
So when I came in, I filled Primo's seat. Primo was mayor in the previous year.
Yeah.
All right. So I should have never been mayor in that first term. Didn't expect to be. One person got on elected, one person chose not to run. I was mayor in the third year. You were mayor in the third
I don't
year.
think there's a problem with that. What I'm saying is that I think that the rotation can be built so that I would never have been mayor in my first year. I have no problem with someone being
Yeah, I
mayor in their
agree. No,
second year.
no.
Honestly, no problem.
And
1 year
that's-
in, I'm fine with it. First year in, it's already drinking from a fire hose. It
Well,
should,
that
you
was
shouldn't
my
be
whole
sitting there.
point, right? If we start now and we choose who the mayor is now, and then in a year or 2 years, whatever, by that time Ben will be on. I don't know if either one of you are running again. That remains to be seen. But by that time, after a year or two, then Ben will be ready if the council chooses whoever is on here. I don't know. But my point is, we're making it too difficult. We need to make it as simple as possible. Bill, were you going to say something?
Yeah, what I would like to see is a 2-year term for both the city council and the mayor be elected at large, then have 4 different districts. But,
I'm so with you on that. I tried
But-
so hard when we went through the.
but we can't do that
redistricting
next
initially.
year because
So with
we've
you
already
on that.
decided who the members, we have people who were elected, people who were appointed. And so we have to come up with a mayor. I hate to tell you this, but I don't agree that any of you should be mayor. I'm sorry, I don't. I just have, there's reasons for each one of you that I don't want you to be mayor. So I think you're gonna have to make a decision. You're gonna have to make a decision without me. But that's the way it is. But I think we should consider the council, a 4-member council with an elected mayor, 2-year terms for everybody, every 2 years, we either the presidential year or the gubernatorial year, we elect the whole new board. But we can't do that now. I realize that. We could do it in 2 years, but you and Mr. Brown would have to agree to that because you are appointed for the next 4 years.
First of all, we can't change to an elected mayor and 4 districts, for instance, period,
Why?
because we're not allowed to by law. I've been researching that.
And we missed that vote.
Yeah, the California
What's the
voting,
vote?
the California voting.
However,
I did try.
Well,
my position, by the way, quickly, and give you some of the reasons, is we leave everything the way it is. We just rotate through for the next couple of years. I think we need to have this dialogue workshop, because if the residents want to change and want an at-large elected mayor, and they want then they can put it on the ballot. It could get on the ballot 2 years. And that really solves a lot of the problems, okay? But we can't do it. The only way it can happen is a resident initiated ballot act. And
Or
then
during the redistricting process.
10 years from now.
Right.
You know,
That the case?
Yes.
I sure as hell don't
Yes.
worry about that.
The California council,
The
I was asking our city attorney, because, we pay her to have opinion.
Sorry. The California Voting Right Act is very clear in that you can only, as a city council, propose a new districting system after every decennial census, or if you have an increase in population in your jurisdiction of 25% or more. And looking at Lincoln, we tried to run some preliminary numbers, and even with annexing what's left of Village 1, remnant of Village 7, Village 5, said B, there will more likely than not be the population necessary to reach that 25% threshold that would automatically trigger the council the opportunity to relook at districts. The only mechanism available for looking to do that would be a referendum by the people, a proposition that they wanted to move forward
And not
with
to
that.
belabor the point, but this is why I think it's important to see what actually happens in Lincoln with districts, because different things happen all over the state with districts. It really is community specific. It depends on, is that district drawn in a way where it's going to generate people who want to run? Is it competitive? Is there fair representation? Are the people who are being elected in those districts coming in and doing a good job on council and thinking of the full city? Are they not? We have no idea what happens yet. And all of that will inform the public, right? Because if it turns out that the district maps that were drawn this last go around end up not being equitable, or end up with lopsided representation, or end up with, myopically focused representation, they might want to consider the conversation of electing a 4-year mayor, because it would do two things. It would give one person who is responsive and responsible for the entire community, and it would increase the population in each district, which might make it easier to find people to run. We don't even know if it's going to be that hard to find people to run. I know that it was hard this time, but we just changed and people were confused by it. I don't think it's been around long enough to know if that's going to be systemic, or if it was just like, oh, hey, we're having growing challenges. I don't think we know yet. But I think that those conversations are going to be important moving forward. I agree with you that the public is going to need to want to weigh in. I don't think we're ripe for that discussion, but we do have to decide how the council is going to be led, and we have to make a decision of what it looks like.
Key to that is what is the job, or what is a mayor in Lincoln? I think partly it's an honor.
And even elected at large, our structure would be the same. It still would not be a strong mayor format. It would just be a 4-year term of the same role.
That's correct.
Just to be clear on
There
that.
would be consistency. that way.
Correct.
And I'm not sure. I'm not sure historically that consistency is.
Well,
really
and that's
entered
my
into
whole
the-
point, is consistency. All right, let's go to public comment and we'll come back to the
Yeah.
council.
Mayor, we do have a hand raised on Zoom. Lena, please go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. I agree with our mayor. The current way of doing things is way too complicated. I read about flipping coins and pulling cards and this and that and the other thing. It is just way too complicated. And it boils down to, who can you work with? The 5 of you right here has to make the decision now. And in the future people can decide who they can work with. But, you've done well together to this point. Don't let this issue, make you less able to make a good decision. And I have to disagree with Councilmember Silhai. Holly's proposal is in the listed items. We have A through F, and this is her ideas, option B. There's only one thing that has to be changed in option B. That would be line out 12 months and put 2 years in there. It says the council selects one of the members to serve as mayor and vice mayor for a period of and you'd put in 2 years. And at their, it says December, that might need to be November, I don't know, city council meeting. Therefore, the council can choose to repeat the process or have the vice mayor become mayor and select one of its members to be vice mayor. It's simple. It's option B. Just read it. It's there already for you to make a decision. And I would encourage you to all select Mayor Holly Andreatta as the next person to serve the 2-year term. She's done an exceptional job. She's made herself available all over this city. Lincoln has someone that's representing it in many, many areas. And she's been an excellent mayor, and I would urge you to go ahead and follow her proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Lena. Anybody else on Zoom?
No.
Okay, Mr. Chapman?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members, city staff. I also agree with Lena. I've been attending the meetings pretty much since I got to town, and I enjoy understanding and knowing how things work. And from the very beginning, I don't want you to get it too large ahead here, Mayor, but you delivered. You actually came up and said, I'm going to listen. I'm going to pay attention to what it is. And the words that hit me and several people that I've talked to about this is that you actually made the comment. And I've not heard this comment from any other on the dais since I've been here, which is, I realize that we work for you being us. And to embrace that and to have the communication in all of the years that I've been here, one of the biggest things to have to deal with, which we shouldn't have to, and I think we've demonstrated it doesn't have to be that way. There's nuances in everything. But yeah, I believe that there has to be a 3-minute time frame. But we've also demonstrated that there are times when that extra 15 minutes or 30 seconds or whatever it might be is valid in understanding what that person is trying to relay and then get back from you. And in doing that, it really sets up the whole picture of you're doing what you said you did. And we've also noticed that I don't believe we've had one single, even when the place was packed with whatever issue it was, not once has the meetings gone on so long that we're into midnight. And those are the horror stories that have been played out over the years and in various cities. That's not the case. And to make it friendly, to make it approachable, and to have people come here for the very first time and not know how all of this works. Madam Mayor, you've actually taken that and allowed and made that person feel comfortable in doing this rather than saying, well, you need to learn how it works. You just have to come up here and take care of it. It doesn't work that way. I again, agree with Lena. I think that you've done a tremendous job. You've changed the focus and the mode and the feelings of the council. And I think the city has come together with the council. I think with Sean, I think he's doing a fantastic job in filling positions and getting things going. And now things are starting to hit the road instead of everybody trying to pick up and carry the load, somebody drops something. So from where I am at this point, Lena and I, whatever the difference may be, I try to stay plugged in. I know Lena does and several others. I personally think that, yeah, I think that's maybe where we need to go until that has to change. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman. Anybody else? And nobody else? Okay, all right, so we'll bring it back to the council.
I just wanted to clarify, Madam Mayor, that there has been no action item agendized for this. So there's no ordinance and no resolution. So I just wanted to make sure that the public seems to think there's something that's going to get voted on tonight. So I just wanted to make sure
No, we
that
don't
was
have
clear.
an action item. but we've been talking about this for a few months now and
Staff would love direction.
we need to give direction because we have one meeting this month and then December is here and we have to make that rotation. So I still contend that we need to make it simple. And I contend that although this rotation has been the history, that we are in a new phase and it's nothing personal. It's not that I don't think that people can't do the job and that I've done it all myself. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is that our town needs stability and continuity. And to change right now is not in the best interest of the city. And that's my contention. And obviously everybody disagrees with me and that's fine. That's what, America's built on is debate and disagreement.
I think you've done a really good job.
Well, thank you. Did you want to say something? Did you turn on the microphone?
Oh, yeah, I did. Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but I would be absolutely against you being mayor for the next 2 years. Okay, I'm sorry. I think it's more important to actually know what you're doing and be mayor rather than act like a mayor. I'm just sorry. I just don't agree with this. As far as Paul is concerned, sorry, I don't agree with you being mayor either. I mean, I've had a lot of feedback from about both of you, and it's been fairly negative. So I'm sorry. Dan, I don't know. So,
No, it's gonna have to be one of them.
hey, but you're gonna do it without me. You're gonna be really,
That's your choice.
I will definitely, if it's between you two, I'll definitely.
I think if you tried to nominate Ben, he might quit before he starts.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think I told Ben to run. I think I told, and I don't mean run for office, I mean run, but anyhow.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm
well,
so sorry to interrupt. Christina and I were just talking, this might be getting a little outside.
Yeah, it's fine.
We're not talking about individuals.
No.
We're talking about
Right.
feedback.
Exactly.
So that if the feedback is no one agrees, then nothing changes. If the feedback is nothing changes, nothing changes. If the feedback changes.
My preference for feedback is we've had the exact same discussion for 3 years, and I don't think that anything that has been brought back is what the actual discussion has been. Like okay, this is what some city does, which I appreciate the models. This is what some city does, this is what some city does, but it hasn't been like, all right, we're gonna sit down and you're gonna decide, are we gonna go by district or not? And just like make us say yes or no to that, and then come with ideas of what by district could look like. If they say by district, they say, no, I don't want to do by district. Don't bring that forward. And then look at what voting each other could look like. We haven't ever, aside from last time when it was brought forward, we had language that we were asked to vote on and we were like, I don't like it.
No.
Like, I think it needs to be like council needs maybe to be like their hand held a little tighter, which I know makes staff nervous. But I do feel like 3 years of the same thing, obviously this like loose, like, okay, here's all the options. Now you tell me every single one of us is going to get like, it's like a cat with a shiny thing. We're just like bouncing all over the place with it. I think that there needs to be maybe just a little more. I know that I won't be on here, but I feel very like 2-year rotation feels like it's premature at this point. And I also think keeping things the way that it is, it doesn't work.
Right.
With the new
so
structure.
if-
So
if
somewhere in
we-
between those two confines.
If we agree that we're not ready for 2-year, that's fine. We can keep it at the 1 year. But I still think that we're doing something new. And the old rotation doesn't work and we need to focus on what's best for Lincoln right now. And that's my feeling, that's my opinion, and I'm not going to say it again. So.
But if we put you in, it would be a de facto 2-year. I have a problem with changing the way that it has always been without like that collaborative consensus, because I think one of the things that actually has helped us get along through some really sticky stuff this last 4 years and actually made us really close, because we often don't agree on things, is always being able to just like give that consideration, talk through it, try to get at least more than just a 3-person majority before we go on something
Sure.
life-changing or
Sure.
right.
Yeah.
And it feels like we're in a real sticky spot that is just
Well,
going
we
to breed
are.
contention.
Well, we are, because I think what we disagree on is what's best for the city as a whole. And what I'm concerned about is, again, stability and continuity. And I understand what you're saying to your fact. I get that. And like I said, it's a bold statement, right? To say, keep me in and let me, keep going. But, okay, Bill, I understand what you're saying, But I'll have to tell you that I don't know who you got negative feedback, and that's fine. Not everybody likes me, but there's a whole lot of positive feedback on all of us.
I'm sure there is.
Okay.
I am sure there is,
So-
but there's also been negative feedback. too.
Well, that's all,
And I- and
well,
I-
yeah.
And
Hey,
just because you've been mayor,
Stop,
doesn't mean
just
you have to be
stop.
mayor
No, no.
next
Just
year.
stop, just
I'm
stop.
sorry. No,
Stop.
you stop too. Okay,
Stop.
you
How
stop.
about
You
everybody
stop.
stop?
You,
I'm going to agree with Dan that we stick for the moment with the rotation as is. There's some refinement that needs to be done to move forward with it. I think on some level, you're in agreement with that. You want to see some future changes.
I do
And I
wanna
think
see
that's a
changes.
discussion for the
Yeah.
council to have over the next couple of years, but for the here and
micro
now.
change, future changes, and just continue what we're doing now.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, all right.
But we're not making decisions. Like, what do you need from this workshop?
I think we've
Because
got
that
enough.
wasn't specific. Yeah, but like, what are we, and I'm using we loosely because it will be brought back after I'm not on, but I'm still here now. What are we expecting back from you?
Well,
when?
look, one of the things that's very difficult for us sitting here listening is that it's not exactly consistent feedback. I'm just be very honest with you. I would say it's consistently inconsistent. And so we could write you a whole menu of different code sections, but it's super complicated. So I think that like if I'm hearing from at least two, and it sounds like maybe one more, that we're gonna work on this as an action item moving forward. It sounds like generally there's, what everybody has agreed on is that the current code as it sits today, the way it's written, maybe not the way it's practiced, needs to be touched up. Well, we can
Overhaul.
provide you some language examples and then it could be wordsmithed here. Yeah.
And when we workshop it, not attached to a council meeting.
Okay.
As a standalone workshop, hour, 2 hours, whatever it takes to just focus on that discussion.
So for feedback for you, what I think worked really well, because we did the same thing for the first few times we talked about our COJA funds, because there were so many possibilities and we all had kind of our own ideas on what could that look like. And then we got focused, and I don't remember if it was you or if it was Mark, but it was, all right, we're gonna like process of elimination. Are we doing this? Yes, no. Okay,
Got it.
those options are off the table. Now, if we're gonna do this, are we doing this? Yes, no. Okay, that's off the table. And it got it down to a pretty narrow list of, all right, these are the things you're actually interested in. I think that process really helped us focus. And then once we had like those 3 options to focus, all of us like were thinking, oh, what do we like better? Or how could we use it? And we came to that final workshop and it was like smooth. And we ended up with really great results from that. I think if you adopted that sort of a process for this, where it's almost like process of elimination, what can we kick out?
Yep.
It should help you not feel like you hate your job and help us focus.
What you're really saying, and I agree with you, is a workshop that has a moderator or a leader.
Yeah. The city
And
manager,
I
because they
guess
pay
you
to
can
do that.
lead, I mean, yeah.
Okay, understood.
I have a problem. Next December, next meeting, we're supposed to have a mayor. Who's it gonna be?
Well, if we haven't voted tonight to change any process,
Paul.
and
It'd
there's
be
not
Paul.
an action
Okay.
item,
We said leave things alone.
well, there's a possibility of having an action item on that meeting, but aside from that, yeah.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chapman, I don't think I can open up public comment again. Sorry. Okay, all right, moving on. Thank you, staff. Okay,
I would like to say, though, I think that you have done a very good job.
thank you, I appreciate that. Okay, item 10D, workshop homeless wet weather. City Manager Sean Stilley will begin the discussion. And I know, Mana, you've been sitting here for a long time. Thank you for hanging with us. I appreciate that.
Yeah, so Christine and I, mostly Christine actually, but Christine and I have been working on this with Mana. And so I think I'm actually going to kick it over to you if you're okay leading.
So the purpose of this discussion item is basically to receive some type of policy direction from council that would enable staff to go out into the field and operationally work with our homeless population, who currently, the members of the population that are of most significant concern are those that are camping on the north side of Auburn Ravine, east and west of Lincoln Boulevard, particularly the one that we call them the post office campers. Those individuals are all camping in a watershed. We were really hoping to be able to do something before we had the storm event that we had last night. I am afraid Mana's volunteer team of Adopt a Creek volunteers are going to go down there tomorrow morning and find quite a disaster. So what we are conceptualizing is, and we've met with Chief Alves and he's expressed his concerns, and I think we found a few ways that are creative that we can work through his concerns. I know that there was a joint task force that met this afternoon in Rockland with both Roseville, Rockland, Lincoln PD, Lincoln Code Enforcement, to kind of start working with HHS more closely on how we better collaborate with our homeless response. But the idea is to, and we've also met with the private property owner that owns the clinic that's there just by the bridge, where unfortunately he and his tenants see a lot of the traffic that crosses over Lincoln Boulevard to Flokini. And then we have a meeting scheduled Thursday morning with several members of the Gateway Commons HOA who are impacted very significantly by the homeless that encamp and travel through that post office area. So one of the concepts that we're thinking about is it's really just as a temporary patch. This would be intended to deal with the winter conditions and for the health, safety, and welfare of not only the residents who are Lincoln residents who are living in our ravine system, but also for the health, safety of our watershed that is being constantly polluted if we're going to start seeing significant rain events like we saw last night and are continuing to see today. So the concept in theory is to work with those individuals and cooperatively find them a place, unfortunately, probably still in that area, but at a higher elevation so that they are not subject to the rising waters and the risks and danger that that provides to them. Also to come up with some type of what we're going to call, for lack of a better word at this point, an encroachment permit that they have to agree to that says they are restricting themselves to a 10 by 10 space, that it is very clear that there is to be no camping or heating fires in this area, and have a very specific list of do's and don'ts. If they violate the do's and don'ts, they're out. The other thing about this concept, at least for the interim bridge period, while we're working on some other longer term solutions, is that it gives us an opportunity to enforce our camping ordinance, because the individuals who are now camping in those areas where we said you can't camp there, but you can move your belongings and sleep in these areas, we are then meeting some of the spirit of Martin v. Boise, and then the more recent case involving Grants Pass, Johnson versus Grants Pass. So that's kind of our concept, big picture. This is largely the brainchild of Mana Bath and her team of excellent volunteers. And so I would suggest, she has some notes and would probably be interested in addressing council about, or no, her thoughts? That was enough? Okay. So essentially, we're looking for some type of policy direction that this is something that gives us a tool so that staff can go and really work the operational side of it with, again, the understanding that if it doesn't work, it's something that we can immediately shut down and redirect.
And I just want to add one other thing. You know, Christine and I are fully aware that there's a possibility that this is a mistake. I think we just want to be open about that. We don't know for sure how it ends up playing out. These are a number of different populations within this area, and we haven't really tried this before. And so there's a possibility that it doesn't work. And if that's true, then we're prepared to pivot and figure out something that does. But that's one of the things that's been brought up a few times, is that maybe this is, maybe we're going to run into some issues, and we probably will. But I just think that being really upfront that we're at least trying something different than nothing.
And so my question that I had asked you the other day was, if we get them out of the creek and behind that building there temporarily, then we're in a position to not let them go back to the creek. I mean, is that kind of what we're aiming for? I mean, I know it's hard to wrangle all of them all the time, but I mean, is that the goal? So to get them out and not let them go back?
Ultimately, the goal would be long-term to not have anyone camping and living in our ravine system. I can't say that we're going to accomplish that in 4 months.
No, I get
But there are projects that Will Foote and our team are working on with looking at these tiny home solutions and potential locations where we could have some sort of transitional housing component here in Lincoln, which we have not successfully done in the past. And so we're looking at a number of different options, potentialities. Also, we're still waiting to see how this regional South Placer Homeless Task Force comes out on their recommendations and policies. What happens with Campus of Hope? I mean, there's just a lot of moving parts in all of this analysis, but I think the answer is that in Lincoln, we haven't really focused our energy on trying to respond to this element of our homeless population. We've just kind of let them be down there. And so that's really the elephant in the room is nobody here wants to say in a public meeting that we're condoning public camping and that we think it's a great thing for you to be living out in the wilds with, buckets and no sanitation. But we have to try something. And I think this is our staff's best effort at trying to get some policy direction from this council to say, yes, we agree, we need to try something and, give it to our staff and our experts that we're working with at HHS to effectuate that.
If you did this encroachment permit idea, who's going to enforce it?
It would again, more likely than not, be code enforcement in connection with the city attorney's office based on citations that were issued by the police department for observation of violations of the permit.
So the police department writes a ticket and you.
And then the city attorney's office takes it from there.
We also may, just kind of depending on how it works out, have a supplemental funding request out of standard allowance to allow us, not significant, but allow us a little bit of a budget to work with. So I think it's not simply just relocating individuals. I think this gives us the ability to focus services in one spot, and maybe make some progress where it might be difficult otherwise. So.
That makes sense.
That is an important concern.
Have you gotten words of support or?
Yes. So absolutely, our HHS workers. So one of the things that this will help them with, it'll also help with probation. For HHS, we get our worker 2 days a month. That's it. And if she's having to spend her entire day walking up and down the ravine from one end of from the 193 all the way down past Flokini to try to find these people, it's really not a particularly great use of her time and talent. And so if we were really able to have these locations focused, she wouldn't need to do that.
Concentrated medication.
And it is concentration, but I also want to be clear, we're talking about a relatively small population. We want 0, of course, but we're talking about 25 to 28 individuals that we'll be working more closely with. When I talk to my counterparts in, Sacramento, and they're talking about Sac City has over 5,000 and Sac County over 8,000, we are trying to create a scaled response. And again, if the residents in that community, the private property owner, they're going to be very vocal with us if it's not working, and then we will pivot and we will make sure that it gets fixed.
So let me just say that I'm very supportive of making a start. I think this is a good plan. There's some nuances that I think are going to pop up on us, and we adjust on the fly. And so I am curious, however, assume for a moment that I'm down along the creek. I don't agree to this encroachment permit. I don't agree to come out. What actions would we be willing to take? And are we actually willing to enforce our other ordinances?
Well, that's, I think, largely in conversations with our chief. A lot of it boils down to, frankly, staffing and manpower. So when you have officers who are perhaps out on workers' comp or medical leave or just other priorities arise because there are other emergencies that do occur in our community. That has been one of our challenges, is that we've tried to implement a few items to ask these individuals to take responsibility. And then we just haven't been able to follow up with enforcement because of low staffing. So that is always going to be something that we have to struggle with, but
And I think that's my concern.
Mhm.
You will have a collapse of this rapidly if a group of people agree, they sign the agreement, they move up to their 10 by 10 square, and everybody else is still down there and living just as they always have. Why should I stay up here?
and that could be something that we have to address, but again, it gives us a heightened ability to cite for those violations because we have afforded them the opportunity of someplace to go.
And please don't get me wrong, I'm very
Mhm.
supportive of this. I'm just trying to explore how this plays
Right,
out
well,
in
I
real
think
life.
we,
There's
I
a-
think if we move them, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. If we move them and we're giving them another opportunity, we can say you're not allowed to be down in the creek, right? Like, we're not arresting them, we're not treating it as a crime, right? But we're giving them another alternative, and I think we have the right to do that. So your point is well taken.
So we're not arresting, we're not citing, but
I-
we're just saying you can't be here. We're saying that right now.
Well, but we're letting them in the creek. What I'm saying is we're not treating homelessness like a crime. We're, what she just said, what you just said, affording them a different opportunity, but we're getting them out of the creek. And I think to your point, we can keep them from going back there. We can say, you're no longer allowed to camp here because we're trying to preserve, and we can cite them for that. Yes, we can cite them for that.
We can
That's if you
cite
have an-
them,
you have
post
an
their
alternate
camp
site.
and clear the camp.
Yes, if we have an alternate site.
Yeah, you can move them, yes.
That's what I was
the
trying
whole
to get
point.
to.
Yes.
Yes. So if they are,
Sorry,
if they remain in an area when we have specifically said, you have another place to go, then we can enforce our camping ordinance. We can post their camp, clean up the camp and deal with it in the more traditional ways that we as cities have responded to
So this
homelessness in
is
the
a
past.
Sideways
How is-
approach to
yeah.
bed for every head.
How is
There's
this,
a 10-foot by 10-foot square for each and every one of you here. And if you
how
don't
is
go up
this
there,
different than like safe shelter site under the law? Are there now specifications about what must be provided in that 10 by 10 square? Are we really going to be like, are we compliant to it? Looking at Sacramento, they do that, and that now becomes just like it's always going to be where homeless congregate. And you've now designated a official, like they're never gonna leave spot, which I understand we've de facto done in the creek. Like I get that. But how is this, how is it different from that? Like, are we just using different words because those words are
well, we're saying it's
progressive
temporary.
and
We're
people
putting a
don't
limit
like
on
those
it.
words in our community, but it's the same thing?
Well, right now, we have a de facto homeless camp in the ravine, and there are no rules and there are no guidelines. And they are living in a very dangerous situation
No, I'm
because they're
aware of
living.
what's
yeah,
going
yeah.
on right now. The proposal, how is it different and how is it different from like a safe shelter site? And do we have any legal obligations about what must be there now? If we're going to designate a specific spot and we're going to try and back into the Boise decision and saying this is now where we have for you, but we don't actually have beds for them and we don't have facilities for them. So are we required to? How are we not required to? Explain that to me. And then also there's a bunch of other like obscure homelessness laws where, you know, if you designate a specific site, there's specific things that must be there. So tell me how we're not triggering any of that by basically doing that.
This is following largely, and I know this will bug Councilmember Joyner, but this is largely following a model that the county is currently using at the DeWitt Center, and they have had very much success in reducing the population that is there.
Why would that bug
Well, I just know that the DeWitt Center is kind of a sensitive subject for you, but it is a model that they have been using there and it has been successful. Now they have Placer County probation and a far more rigorous enforcement model,
Which
I
was
would
gonna be my
say.
next question, like, what are your thoughts on this and what is the impact to our officers and what is the impact to public safety? And, you know, you knew that that question was coming. I always put you in the hot seat. Yeah.
Waiting. So, yeah, and that was my primary concern. I mean, the whole concept in general, took me a while to wrap my head around it. But once we talked through it a little bit and got a bit creative as far as the encroachment with end dates, because it's, I am just of the observation that once government benefits are handed out, they're very difficult to ever repeal. And that's my concern. If we were to go through with this, my biggest concern is the enforcement. And right now, I can't commit the amount of staff that I would feel comfortable in keeping the north side clear, enforcing the rules on the south side. It's in concept, it seems logical, but again, the only way you can do it is constant every day. Okay, there's a new camp on the north side. We need to tag the camp, then we need to follow up. And that's all staff time that we are extremely short just to handle regular things.
Because we've talked about getting you like a homelessness task force,
Right.
but we don't have that yet,
Right.
which we don't have, correct?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's just something of this, though simple, this is of a very large magnitude, and it will have a lot of impact for the police department and code enforcement. And without the proper infrastructure and staffing to begin with, I'm just very nervous about it. Again, in concept, I think it's pretty sound, again, with the limitations that we're putting on. But I think there's a lot of work and money up front to do it the right way. And I just wouldn't want it to get out of hand. And I appreciate Sean saying, we don't know if this is going to work, because I don't know either.
Is it, one of the things that I appreciate about the city and about Mona and everything you've done and the task force and everything you've done with it is that we've had success by just being like, hey, I don't really know how this is going to go, but what's working right now isn't working, and let's try something new, and the willingness to kind of be innovative and really dogged in the approach. What I think this is a little different though, is that this isn't asking, how do I say it? This is now creating a system, which sounds great, and I think would be great to explore, but it's putting the onus on a backbone system we don't have. And we know we don't have it yet. So if the entire thing is kind of predicated on, and now we're going to have enforcement, which the county's having success with because they have that, and they have a huge budget and a lot of resources, and we have a tiny budget and no resources. I wonder if we're not setting up something that is not ripe yet. Is it something that we can, and this is an honest question, I don't know the answer to. I feel like when we've asked questions like this before, somehow we're able to find things that we didn't find before. Is it possible to find resources so that we can implement this next year and have something propped up within PD that's not going to be perfect and it's not going to be 3, but something that is more than what we have now to be able to like phase into it so that we actually have a structure in place where there's assurance that like what we think is going to happen will happen? Or is there no value in that? And it's just like, hey, let's just see what happens.
You
mean,
could, but I think like there's a few issues. First off, if we spent the next year trying to stand the same thing up for next year, then I would call that a wasted year, because we really should be spending our time creating permanent solutions. This is titled, what do we title it? Temporary winter camp. And to me, the idea is less about making sure that we're going through and every single person has to comply, because we're certainly going to strive for that. But it may be that it's not as difficult as we think it is.
Right.
I've done this before in other communities. It wasn't as hard as people thought it was going to be. When you created, you had a community meeting, Mona, we've talked about, getting the kind of usuals that we have down there together and having a discussion about, okay, look, things are changing. You're going to have to move over here. It's not a debate. There will be consequences if you don't. Here's how it happens. Maybe we get down to 1 or 2 individuals that are really difficult to deal with. And Chief and I will have to work out how operationally that is figured out. May mean we got to cut some more OT. May mean that we have to come back with a budgetary request to augment a little bit, because this has gotten to be more work than we thought it was going to be. We just have no clue. And I can't forecast it with no experience.
If you just frame that, you have my support.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah. No, I'm very supportive too, but I just want to circle back to Chief. So I just want to clarify understand what you were saying. You're nervous. We're not sure how it's going to go, but you're willing to try. You're willing to go along with it for now. Is that what I heard you say? Or did you say no?
I do what I'm told.
Yeah.
He politely said
And-
no while saying he'll do
Okay.
it.
It's being in this business as long as I've been in it and starting up programs that are very well intentioned without the proper backbone rarely succeed. Not saying that this isn't an anomaly.
Right.
But I've just, the hairs stand up on the back of my neck when things like this are brought up and with knowing our abilities. I mean, we'll do whatever we can. Hopefully it's enough. But again, like Sean was saying, I don't know.
Yeah.
Do we think it's something that we would have success in, just taking PD out of it, knowing the limitations, which are significant? And
With
it's
code
just like
enforcement.
with code enforcement and with just the community goodwill, trying to, trying to work it out, obviously they're there when they can be there, but knowing that we have just been told very clearly what the limitations are of our department, is it something that we still think we could achieve success with?
Yeah, come forward.
Well,
Mike, and then
I
let
want to
Sean-
hear from you, but I want
Yes.
to hear from
Come up-
Sean first.
Come up and then we'll let Sean go and then you can speak.
Okay, so you're gonna have to address the code enforcement component, but I think what I would generally say is that there is certainly a lot of the football field that code enforcement can run before we would need a sworn person present, right?
Agree. I think code enforcement could be involved. Ultimately, code enforcement is not authorized to issue violations of the penal code, certain health. So ultimately, there would have to be an officer that goes down there, witnesses the misdemeanor and issues the citation. But there could be a lot of interference that code enforcement runs to try to make sure it doesn't get to that point.
Is your manpower, person power problem overtime dollars? Or is it just pure staff?
It's pure
Pure
staff.
bodies.
Yeah, pure staff. I mean, I had a sergeant and 2 officers working today in this weather. So, and that's kind of a normal day right now.
Can I say something to that? First, I just.
Mana, can you speak in the microphone so everybody can hear you?
NTU.
Can I?
There you go. Thank you.
First of all, I think the chief has some very valid questions and concerns. And what I think this gives us a real opportunity, like I heard you guys talk about how much dialogue and opportunity you had on the wastewater treatment whole thing, is to dialogue some of these questions, concerns, that we move forward slowly. And I have a lot of ideas on how we can take a half step or a quarter step and see how that goes, but at least we're stepping. All right. So, and we're working together. I want to remind you that over 3 years ago, when I started with the homeless, it was Sergeant Ibarra. Okay. And at that time, we didn't have, over 3 years ago, we didn't have the LPD staffing. Okay. They weren't able to do anything more than responding to calls down there. But we got a task force together. We worked in collaboration with our county resources, HHS, our probation. Okay. Public Works, Scott Boynton and I put together the Adopt a Creek team. And we made progress over the last 3 years with what support LPD could provide. So I'm saying at this time, if we wait to do anything, we're going to get more people here. We're only going to get so many more new officers, and we're never going to have the appropriate time to do it, or the staff to do it perfectly. Okay. So we go slow right now. We work together with the concerns that were addressed. And I believe we're going to make a difference. Will we do that, making a mistake or two, or not thinking how we wanted to do it, but we're doing it differently? Sure. But we're not going to make a gigantic leaping mistake. Okay. We're going to know as we go along how it's going. So that would just be my thing. 3 years ago, we were in the same situation, and I'm proud to say we've made some progress over the last 3 years. So let's, but it's not enough right now. We got to do something different. Let's take a little step out to do something a little different now. And 3 years from now, we're going to look back and go, we're glad we did. Thanks.
Thank you, Mona.
Yeah, which was my question to you, right? Let's take PD out of it, noting those limitations, like we did last time when we discussed the task force and the adopt all of that. And is it going to produce at least enough progress to make it worth it?
Yes, and like one of the things that you pay me to do is make sure that your operation is run the way it should be run. And so Chief and I are the ones that'll have to worry about resources. Results are what you all care about. And so to the extent that I have to come back and say, look, we don't have enough resources and we need to address it.
Yes and no, because I think that still is a policy decision, because Chief just told us it's a staff issue, not necessarily a resource issue, which means that at the policy level, we're going to have to decide if you're going to be tasking PD to be down in the creek, that means they're not in the community. And that's a policy decision. That's not just a resource.
Well,
decision.
I sort of agree with that, but what I would say more specifically to that is we don't know the answer to that question yet.
I
So
like
we
that
have
answer
to
better.
figure it out.
I
And I will come back. And if
I
we
like
need
that answer better.
more dollars, then we need more dollars. And if we don't need more dollars, which I hope we don't, we won't ask. Actually, Chief might still ask, but I mean.
And we fully intend to report regularly to you on the progress and problems and concerns and solutions.
Well,
What was the outcome wanted from this?
just a direction that they can go ahead and move forward with this.
Correct.
I think you
Yeah.
have your direction. All right, awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Mona. Okay, item number 11, council initiated business. Anybody have business?
I do not.
Number 12, information items. The only thing I want to say is that was a great ceremony this morning.
Oh, my God.
Pinning 4 new firefighters and 3 promotions. Well done, well done. It was a very proud day, probably one of my proudest days ever. It was amazing, so thank you.
Ditto that. It was really hard to not be emotional, and I don't do emotions. It was really neat to be able to see that come
Yep.
full circle.
Anybody else? Hey, thank you, staff. Thank you, everybody, for being here. We are adjourned.